All right, so let's talk a little bit about what the plan is for this semester. I put a link already into Discord about what our schedule is. So we're going to be continuing in a hybrid format this semester with roughly 2 days in person and 3 days virtual. So we'll always be in the Discord channel throughout the semester. I would ask that you, whether we're in person or whether we're not, that you always join the Discord channel every day and be available there. Sometimes I have announcements even when there's not a lecture or different things or notes or, discussions come up. So it's good to be there at the beginning of class to kind of maybe talk through some issues that you're running through with labs. Because there's usually, even if there isn't a lecture plan, there's usually something to talk about one way or the other. Okay. So that's the schedule. You can find a link to it if you're on Inside Ranken, you'll go down to bookmarks. You'll see here it says class schedule. That's how you get to the current class schedule. Because so I've just linked it there directly to the Google Drive document so that you can get the latest version rather than me exporting it as PDF and then having to update it every time. So that will likely change as things progress. I've got the schedule kind of roughed out through the end of March, which is roughly when I'm hoping to finish the textbook, is the end of March. That gives us about a month to focus on some additional pieces they're actually pretty important that aren't in the textbook, namely to work with things like web services, web APIs and REST APIs, like we started building last semester. Those aren't really covered in the textbook, so I want to make sure that we have some time to do that, as well as looking into Firebase, which is a very useful way to kind of store your data. It's also a NoSQL database, but it's a different kind of NoSQL database for kind of storing your data and synchronizing it between devices and servers and such. So that's what we'll be doing in May, and that's why April. So that's why our pace might seem a little bit fast in terms of trying to finish that book, just because those additional pieces are actually kind of important. So that's why you'll see a pretty rapid pace as we go through the textbook, because I want to get to that material. What is in this textbook that we're going to use is mostly UI focused. So, it's not focused so much on the data part. The last piece, it's broken down into 4 units. The last unit of that is the only one that we really start talking about databases. So that's kind of where that lies. And so if it seems like we're skimming over things pretty quickly, that's part of the reason is that the stuff that's in the textbook is not necessarily the most important stuff. It's maybe the stuff that's outside of the textbook that actually has a little bit more value. So that's why we're going to move pretty quickly through it. Okay.
Good.
So let's bring up my slides. I'll go ahead and share these so you can have a copy of them, but they're also up on Perusal so that you can comment and discuss. But let me go ahead and give a link to this. Anyone with the link. Copy link.
How much will we actually be using our phones in development to test this here? I guess it would be a constant companion, right? Because that's what it's all about, is mobile. Yeah.
Yeah, it's all about mobile. So, every time as you're working through things, you should be constantly testing things. You can potentially use your own device to do some of that testing. I would advise against it, because whatever your configuration of your personal device is not going to match the configuration of the device that I'm going to grade you on. So you can do that, but I would avoid doing that heavily, because it's going to end up meaning that you're targeting a different screen size or version of Android than what I'm going to be grading you on. So to keep things kind of even, there's some tablets that we've purchased, as the Ranken has purchased, and they're sitting in my, I have some that are sitting in my office, and we're planning to purchase more. I don't know if that's gone through yet, but we'll be handing those out next week. There's Samsung Tab A's. If I remember right, they're like 7-inch tablets. So each of you will be getting one of those to test your applications on.
Mr. Smith, how easy is it to go from like Android and then convert it to iOS?
Not easy. Personally, I haven't really done anything with Android and Swift, but from what I understand, it's a pretty different world. So, there are things that are in common. There are definitely things that they have in common, because there's a lot of things in terms of how you build GUIs is pretty standard even between mobile and desktop. There's a lot of similarities to how we build UIs, but the nitty gritty of how a lot of things work with resources and XML files and Java, it's going to be a different story. So it's not something where you can pick up an Android app and easily just say, okay, I want to write this code and put this app over on iOS. It's really, you have to build it back up from the ground up, unfortunately. So one of the things that we've seen in the industry is kind of a growth, and in the future there's an alternative there. There's been a few alternatives, but the currently growing one is something called React Native, which we're considering potentially eventually moving the curriculum over to, because React Native does support both Android and Swift, at least in theory, but we haven't really done enough testing on there to verify that. Cool. So what we're building is Android apps. This may or may not translate over to iOS. Unfortunately, there's just a lot of differences between the two.
Cool.
But I think if you understand the material here, it at least will give you some preparation, for to kind of understand things that you should think about, and and those kind of things if you do decide to go into iOS. Okay. So the class name here is Mobile Application Development. That changed recently. It's not up to date in the inside Ranken. It's not up to date on your catalog yet, I don't believe, because we just got it earlier this year, approval to change the name of the program. So you may still see it as Programming Fundamentals with Java or similar, but that's the new name, because we've kind of decided to switch it because of shifts in markets. So that's what you'll see on my slides, as I call it, and stuff I call it Mobile Application Development, even though that may be a different name than what you see. So the plan for today, I'm going to go sort of a brief mini lecture at the beginning here, and then we'll go through some of the setup stuff and some of the policies, procedures, syllabus type of things of how the class is going to run, concluding with trying to get some of your tools installed. If you've looked at the calendar already or paid attention to the plan for today and tomorrow, one of the things I really need you to do as your homework assignment tonight, this afternoon and tonight, is to make sure you get all your tools installed, your JDK, IntelliJ, and Android Studio, because we're going to go ahead and start coding tomorrow. So you really need to get those installed, and we'll kind of talk about that towards the end of this. So that's kind of our brief overview of what we'll talk about today. I'll talk about an outline of the class, some of the history of versions of Java and Android. We'll go over a brief Hello World example. We'll talk about policy procedures. We'll get everybody on Perusal and started on GitHub Classroom with creating your repos. And then we'll talk about, installing your software and different things that you need to have set up in terms of your IDE and such. So to kind of outline how this is going to run, we've broken this up into a few different units of topics of things that we'll cover. So the first unit that we're going to do is we're just going to talk about Java, the language itself specifically, to get you introduced to that. So that will be about the first week of class. We're going to start that today and tomorrow, and that will go through next week. And for that time, we'll actually be using IntelliJ as our IDE of choice. After that point, coming into basically the third week of class, because this is a short week, we'll then start building Android apps using Android Studio. So do know that there's going to be a little bit of an IDE shift there in the next week. We'll start with IntelliJ, and then we'll go over to Android Studio. The good news is those are very, very similar IDEs, so a lot of things that you learn with IntelliJ will transfer directly over to Android Studio. So that shouldn't be a too big deal, but it does mean when you're configuring things, it does mean you're going to have to configure like your tab, your indentation, such in IntelliJ and Android Studio. So the course that we're using is one called Android Fundamentals, Android Developer Fundamentals. It's broken up into 4 units. Unit 1 is called Making Your First Android App. We'll cover that. Actually, we'll go through that in I think 3 weeks is the plan. Unit 2 talks about building GUIs in Android, so that goes into more of the GUI type stuff and all the different controls and styling them and things like that. So we'll spend about 4 weeks on that. Next up is working in the background. That we'll spend about 2 weeks with. I wish we could spend more time on that because there's a lot of things in there. In Unit 3, there are going to be some pieces that we're going to skip and rearrange because there's been some recent changes with the way that those kind of things work, where your background services and such. Android's changed how a lot of those things operate, so we will be skipping a chapter or 2 in there. And then finally, Unit 4 is all about saving user data, which we'll only be covering about half of. So we're going to spend a week on that. We'll go over Lesson 9. Lesson 10 is about using the Room database in SQLite. Rather than focusing on that, I'm going to end up trying to devote that time to Firebase and such, because I think that that's a better fit for most apps rather than talking about all the things that go into there. So, once we finish up the textbook, which will be there around Unit 4, we want to spend about 2 weeks on Picasso and Volley, which are 2 really good technologies, they're kind of small libraries that can help you do things. Picasso's good for loading images. Volley's good for sending HTTP requests to things like your web APIs and such. Firebase is kind of a NoSQL database. We'll talk about that and work on your final project. So that'll be the last 3 weeks of the course, is that. So that's kind of the broad overlay of how we're going to cover things and where those things are going to land. So as you maybe have already heard or figured out, this course is going to be going over the Java language. At the moment, you've already seen a few maybe different languages. Primarily, you've been working with JavaScript, and you've worked with C#. JavaScript, if you're not aware, has nothing to do with Java. There's no commonality between JavaScript and Java. The only reason JavaScript has its name is because, if I remember right, the people behind it that were working on Netscape and such decided it would be a cool marketing term because, well, Java was a popular language at the time. So they said, well, let's call it JavaScript, and maybe it'll get more popularity if we call it that. And so that's really that's the reason that it's called what it is, not because it has anything to do with Java. It was just a marketing ploy. So if we go back in the history of languages, there's been a lot of different languages over the years, and they've gone in different ways and had different approaches to how you write code. So Java draws its roots really back to C++. Java is basically, at least tries to be, the attempt was to be a improved version of C++. And of course, C++ was an improved version of C. So if you go back to C, C was created by AT&T Bell Labs back in 72. AT&T Bell Labs continued being kind of a dominant force in that space, and so they also came up with C++ in 85. Okay, so there was a number of problems with C++. One of the was just that it was a very complicated language, and there's a lot of places where you could it really let you do whatever you wanted and let you be pretty close to the hardware, but that meant there's a lot of places where you could create bugs or do things that were generally undesirable. So one of the big things that Java did when it came out in 96 was actually remove a lot of features from C++ that caused problems. So trying to put some guardrails around developers to say, well, you can't do this because, you know, we saw that this created problems. So a lot of features, you know, Java has a very similar syntax to C++ in a lot of ways. But it doesn't have a lot of those features that existed in C++. One of the big things that it did, which was novel at the time, well, two things that it did were novel at the time. One is it jumped into the space of garbage collection, in which you're actually familiar with in doing C# and JavaScript, in this idea of you can create objects, you know, for instance, using the new keyword, but you never have to delete or destroy those objects, right? If you just stop using them, they automatically get discarded, right? So that's the world of garbage collection in Java, is you don't have to delete things. Back in C++, you did. If you didn't delete it, then the memory would continue to be in use by your application. Okay. So Java, the first version of Java came out around 96. A few years after that, Java had really started taking up popularity, and along comes C#, because Microsoft's looking at this and they want a piece of the pie and get in on this object-oriented and garbage-collected world, so they make C#, which C# is kind of somewhere between a mishmash of C++ and a mishmash of Java. They took an approach that said, okay, Java did some really cool things, let's learn from that. But they also took the approach that, well, there were also some things back in C++. I know they were dangerous, but we'd really like to have them. So C# has kind of a combination of those two pieces. I'd say C# is probably closest to Java, but it definitely borrows things from both sides. So that's what you'll kind of see. You'll see that Java has a syntax that you're very familiar with from C# because C# was based on Java. But you'll also see that things are a little bit different because it comes from a different date and time, and it comes from a different impetus from the language design. So one thing that Java did, as I had mentioned, is garbage collection was a brand new thing. The other thing that it did which was brand new is the code that you write in Java doesn't run directly on the hardware. That's not the norm. Back in most programming languages before that, you'd write your program, you compile it, and eventually it would get down to what we call machine code, which would be directly the instructions to run on a physical machine. Java does not run on any actual physical machine. There's no machine, there's no computer that can actually run Java code directly, including Android phones. They don't run Java code directly. There's a layer in between your Java code called the virtual machine, the Java virtual machine. So anytime you're running Java code, it's running on a VM, right? It's running on an emulator because the code that it compiles down to is what we call bytecode, not machine code, bytecode. And that bytecode runs on that virtual machine, okay? Questions?
Nope.
So have any of you actually set up and run a virtual machine before, say using VMware or similar?
Yeah.
Once.
So what's been your experience? What do you know about VMs in having used those before?
It's complicated to set up, but once you get started, it goes.
Everything never works right.
They usually require a little bit more resources, right?
Yeah.
There's usually those programs are a little bit slower, right?
Yeah.
So that some of that still persists. Java programs will always be slower than C++ programs because of that virtual machine in between, pretty much universally. The difference though lately is there's something called just-in-time compilation nowadays in modern JVMs, which what they'll actually do is they'll take the bytecode and compile it down to machine code as it's running. So actually most modern JVMs are built that way. So you can get pretty close to machine code level performance now once it does that just-in-time compilation. The trick is that compilation happens when the program runs rather than you getting to do it in your compiler and in your IDE environment and then shipping that, and it's immediately fast.
So Mr. Smith, if Java is like so slow, like everyone says, like that it's slower than all the other languages, then why do they use it?
Why do you use it? So the upside of that JVM is that it can run on any operating system and any hardware. Because it's not running directly on the hardware, I don't have to make 5 builds for different hardware and software combinations, right? So my version of my program, it can run on Windows, it can run on Mac, and it can run on Linux or any other operating system that exists out there without being recompiled, right? So the same bytecode runs on any operating system and also runs on any CPU. So whether you have an Intel CPU or an AMD CPU or an ARM chip, which what most smartphones have is an ARM chip, you don't have to recompile that code. Does that make sense? So the idea is that it can run anywhere.
Yeah.
So that's what you get out of running it on a VM over running it directly on the machine code. It's slower, but it means you can, in theory, run it. It means you can run it anywhere. Okay. So that's where that comes in. It is worth noting here. So originally, Java was developed by Sun Microsystems. Back in 2010, Sun Microsystems ceased to be and was bought out by Oracle. So Java is now currently owned by Oracle, which is kind of an interesting thing because, well, who makes all of the Android smartphones and the Android operating system?
Oracle?
Not Oracle.
Google,
right? So Google owns basically the Android operating system and everything that goes into that, not Oracle.
Sorry, I didn't understand.
So what that means is, there's maybe some legal concerns that have arisen in years past because of that split. So to the point that the Google's actually had to make changes to the Android operating systems in response to some legal arguments. So looking at the kind of the evolution of Java, is Java 1.0 was released back in 96. 98, just 2 years after that, we got Java 1.2. Java 1.2 is also known as Java 2 if you're looking at the documentation. And it continued to be like 1.3, 1.4, 1. Etc. Up until we finally, in 2004, we got Java 5. They stopped doing point releases and they finally acknowledged it's like, hey, we need to do a whole version release. And so Java 5 was a really big deal because up until that point, we didn't have things called generics or collections. Those were a really, really big add back in 2004. It was one of those things that had existed in C# basically since its inception. but had never been adapted over to the Java world, which was kind of a big deal. Anytime you say you want to make a list of objects, that was not something that you couldn't easily do without a lot of typecasting. So you had to do a lot of explicit casting before 2004. That being said, the way that the Java approached the idea of generics is not the way that C# or that C++ or even C# approached it. In fact, one of the things that C# did, which is really helpful, when they introduced generics, they took the approach that you can do generics with reference types and you can do it with primitives. And there's no real major differences oftentimes with either one. So I can have a list of integers just like I can have a list of strings or a list of employees. The approach that Java took, because of its kind of background, the idea with Java is everything's an object and should be an object. So with the generic system that they introduced, you can only use objects. So you can't really have a list of integers. There's a hack to make that work, but you can't really have that because the generic system does not support primitives, such as int and float, etc. But that was a really big deal. So Java 5 came out in 2004. About 4 years after that, we saw the first version of Android. So Android 1.0 came out around 2008. And that included the virtual machine that it ran was what was called the Dalvik VM. Dalvik Virtual Machine was the name of the virtual machine that ran Java at that time. That, as it turned out, that Dalvik VM shared a lot of code with Sun Microsystems implementation, which, for better or for worse, meant that, hey, there was a lot of code sharing between Java formerly that would run on desktops and Java that would run on mobile. But since then, it's really branched. So the version of Java that runs on Android is not the same version of Java that Oracle now maintains. Those are not the same versions of Java. They're really in two different forks. So what that means is there are some language, in the current version of Java that just came out last year. In 2020, we've got Java 15. Java 15 is not the Java that runs on your smartphone. So it doesn't share all of the latest language features because there's been a split. So that's worth it to know. Just because you see something in a Java tutorial, especially if it's newer, post 2004, it may or may not work on a Android phone because that syntax support may not be there. It's now possible with the newest phones. It's actually possible to get up to Java 8 support, but that's as far as the support is on the Java side, is Java 8, which is released in 2014. So that's for reference, okay? So the Java that we're working with essentially nowadays, the oldest smartphones, you can rely on Java 5. The newest ones, you can get all the way up to Java 8. So that's a kind of thing to pay attention to as you're looking at the different API documentation. There's documentation for Java and there's documentation for Android. They're not exactly the same because there's been that split in paths. So with Java 5.0, which came out in 2014, following a legal dispute with Oracle, the virtual machine that now runs on Android devices that are 5.0 or later is a new virtual machine called the Android Runtime, or ART. So if you're developing for older devices pre 5.0, it'll be running on the Dalvik VM. Newer devices will be running on the Android Runtime. They're usually not too much difference in terms of developing for those two. That being said, it's usually quicker to deploy and install apps on ART than it is on the Dalvik. Okay. Questions?
We don't really need to worry about stuff that's that old, though. I mean, hardly anybody's got a phone that's more than 3 years old anymore.
You would be mistaken.
Oh, you got one?
I have mine's pretty modern, and most people's are, but there is a percentage of the population that does have things that are older than 5.0. And the thing that you have to be aware of, a lot of that older technology is also not necessarily in the States. It is true that there are the other parts of the world that do tend to run a little bit behind in terms of version numbers. So while that may not seem like, dealing with 5.0 or lower might seem like a thing that you're never going to encounter in the US, you're kind of right. You definitely will encounter it abroad. So you do have to be aware of that from a global standpoint. You might see stuff older than that if you're dealing with customers in other countries. Okay?
Okay.
So we tend to stay up with the latest and the greatest, and part of that is the programs from your cell phone provider that say, hey, you can get a new phone because you've had service with us for 3 years or whatever, right? So we have a pretty high turnover rate, but that's not true internationally. To look at the Android version history, every version of Android has historically had both a code name and a version number and what we call API level. The API level is what we actually program to. So that's just a single integer that says, here's the standard that I'm programming my code to. So that's what you'll actually see in the code is the API level. What you'll hear in the marketing is the version numbers or the code name. Okay, so the oldest ones that I really see basically on the market now today that you could say go on Amazon and get are KitKat devices, which were released in 2013, and that's version 4.4 of Android. That KitKat was API levels 19 through 20. And so what you'll see on here, and this is the biggest number I want you to pay attention to on this chart, is the cumulative distribution, right? So what we're saying there is if you target KitKat or above, you're going to hit 98% of devices, okay? Because there's only about 2% of devices globally that are lower than that. Does that make sense? Step up just to the next version, 5.0. You look at that goes down to 94.1. So if you target Lollipop, which is 5.0 or greater, you're going to be hitting basically 95% of the market. There's 5% of the market that won't be able to run your app, won't be able to install it and run it. Does that make sense? So it's important to kind of stay up to date with that and see, how far in the past you need to go. And odds are these numbers will not necessarily reflect your actual user base. Your actual user base may be different than this. These are simply global averages. So if you actually were to go to deploy an app, you'd want to pay attention to some statistics in your Android console, your Play Store console, to see, what kind of versions are actually being used or using your application. So specifically on this graph, what we will be targeting this semester, and this is something you'll need to remember because you'll need to put it into your actual applications. So go ahead and write this down. We're going to be targeting APIs 21 as our minimum to 29 as our high. The 29 is kind of important because with 29 we got something new called Jetpack, which has been a really big change to the Android world. But you need to be supporting API 29 or higher in order to use it. So this course that we're going to be using that was developed originally by Google, their version numbers that they support, I think, are somewhere around 19 through 28. So we will have to do some updates as we go through that. And when we do our first week of Android, I am going to kind of walk you through the labs because there's a lot of changes, especially in that first week, between when they were developed about a year or two ago and where they are today. So there are a lot of things that we'll have to kind of maybe do differently because there's been some, just changes in the last 2 years about how things operate. Okay? So that's how the version numbers kind of fall out. Oftentimes you'll hear this and the constants in Android kind of refer to these: Kit Kat, Lollipop, Marshmallow, Nougat, Oreo, Pie. So you can kind of see for the longest time they were basically sweets, was primarily their code names. And then recently they've gone over to letters. So Android 10 is Q and R is Android 11, which actually just came out at the end of this last year. So R is fresh off the presses. I can't actually get from Google. They haven't released numbers on how many people are actually using that one yet, and I'm going to suspect that there are very few devices using API 30 as of yet. But I expect that to change by the time we're done with the semester. So there'll probably be at least 5% of the market up on API 30 by the time we get done. So, questions?
Nope.
So I'm just trying to get you into, hey, here's some of the version history, and here's, how things connect. Where does Java fit into the picture, and where does Android fit into the picture? So kind of what we're going to look at. But write that down, 21 through 29, because that's what I'm going to have you do for all of your assignments with Android. Okay. So let's talk about maybe writing a simple program in Java. Writing a simple program in Java is really not that different from writing a simple program in C#. So everything in the world of Java has to be in a class. Unlike JavaScript, where you can just kind of have functions floating out in the ether, just floating out in your server.js or index.js, and they don't have to be in classes. Everything in Java has to be inside of a class. Okay. So here I've got a class named Hello World. I've marked that class as public. Public means that you can use that class anywhere in your application. Inside of that, I have something called main. Anybody can guess what that something is?
It prints out the main?
What is main?
That's like your that's your initiator. It's your constructor.
It's not my constructor, because my constructor would be called Hello World.
Oh, that's your wouldn't that just be a method then?
It's just a method, right? In this case, it's more a function, but it's a method or a function. You can call it either. So I have a method named main. You'll see that it's marked void. What does void? Remember from C# what void means?
Returns nothing.
It doesn't return anything. Okay, so it doesn't return anything. It's marked static. What does static mean?
It doesn't change.
Nope. You're thinking const.
Oh, it's a global. It ends up being a global attribute, and it also you can't change it when it's static. Or no,
you can change it.
Final. When that's when you make it final. Sorry.
So yeah, final prevents things from being changed. Static, you're sort of on the right track for global. What anybody else can remember? It's actually static is the same thing as C#. It means the same thing here as it does in C#.
It's something that has to do with sharing within just that class. It's
not really. That has to do that you're thinking more access modifiers.
Isn't it like an instance like of that class, and then you can access that instance from other classes?
So the instance, that word instance, has something to do with it, but what you said is not correct. But it does have to do something with what is an instance? And what do we always say there's instances of?
Objects?
Instances. So objects are instances of classes. So an object is an instance of a class. It's the constructed object, right? So you can kind of think of the class as the blueprint for it, and the object is the actual thing, right? So static means that you don't need an instance to call that method. So non-static methods have to be called on an object. So you have to construct the object and then call the method on that instance, right? So if I didn't mark this static, I would have had to say new hello world and then call main on that object. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But because it's static, I can call it directly on the class without constructing an instance. So I can just say hello world dot main. So that's necessary for here. The main method runs when your program starts. It's the first thing that happens anytime you're writing a JavaScript program, Java program, and this is actually borrowed from the world of C++ that also had this idea of a main method. So the idea is the main method is what runs when you initiate the program from the command line. So what we're starting to build here is we'll be building console applications in Java form specifically. So you run that command, you run that over the command line, and it runs this main method. It needs to be static because by the time that started up, it hasn't had a chance to construct anything. Does that make sense? Because it's the very first thing it's doing. So it's going to call that main method. You can see it's marked public. Public, like you're familiar with in other object-oriented languages, means that you can call that method from anywhere in your program, right? So just like public on the class means you can access the class from everywhere, public on the method means that you can access the method from anywhere. So we call main, we pass in an array of strings. That's what the square brackets here mean, is this is an array of strings. And that's the arguments that you passed over the command line. So you can write Java programs or C++ programs and such in a way that they can take arguments that you put in when you started the program up. Okay, so that's where those would come in. We're not going to focus enough on console applications to actually use those. So that's what that's about. If you're writing console applications, they're very helpful. But our main focus is going to be on getting to Android. In the world of Android, this main method no longer exists. So the way that you get in the entry point for Android is a little bit different, but as we're kind of getting used to the Java syntax, that's what we'll be doing. So to build your architecture, your skeleton for any application that you build, you're going to need a class that it starts with. That class needs to have a method with this signature, public static void main, and takes an array of strings. So that's necessary to build a console application. Inside of there, you can see that we're calling system.out.println. So that will go ahead and write the word hello world out to your console. So let's say I want to build this and I want to try and run this with Java. So one of the things I can do, let me go to my folder here, projects, and I'm going to go look at, there it is. So I've got a hello world little folder here. If you want to say create a new Java file without using any sort of IDE, you can actually do some basic development in Java without an IDE. It's not too terribly hard, but there's a little bit of setup that you have to do to make that happen. So let's say I want to create this program. Let's say this is our first Java program here, which is I'm going to create a new text document. I'm going to call this hello world .java. So you notice any Java source files end with the extension Java. And it's also worth noting that in the world of Java, your name of your file has to be exactly the same as the name of your class that you're going to put inside there. You with me there?
Yep.
And even the case should match. So if I put that in all lowercase, it may or may not work depending on what operating system you're running in. So make sure you follow the case of the name of your class. So I'm going to create a file named helloworld.java. And inside of there, I can actually just go here in Notepad++. I'm going to start typing in what's there. So if we look at that, I need to put in public class hello world. Now, if you're following along with me at this point, you don't have any software installed yet, so it may or may not, it probably will not work for you yet. But we'll deal with that towards the end of this here today. So public static void main needs to be lowercase. Now, one thing you'll notice in there, I almost accidentally did. You'll notice that I have a lowercase m here, not an uppercase m. In the world of C#, the convention was that all of your methods should start with an uppercase letter. In Java, the convention is that all of your methods should start with a lowercase letter. Okay, so and that's actually helpful because it helps you tell you what kind of thing it is. So you know if it starts with an uppercase letter like camel casing like this, then you know it's a class or it has to be a class. And then if it's lowercase like this, it's probably a method or a member variable of some sort. So public static void main. I'm going to add the string array of arguments. And inside of that, I'm going to say system.out.println. And inside of there, I'm going to say hello world. So one of the pieces to remember here, so system.out.println, that's the way to write just a single line out to the console. Okay. System is a global object that you can access anywhere. Basically refers to your operating system. And then underneath that, you have a property, a member variable called out. This is also, we talked about static. This is a static variable because I didn't have to say new system. It's just system.out, so I'm referring to that. So that gives me a print stream object that I can write to, and on that out, I can say, well, print line. There's a few other methods. For instance, if you just say print, that will write what you tell it to write without terminating the line. So print line prints what you tell it to do it, and then also adds a line terminator automatically, like think /n. So it already adds the /n. And then in there, I put a string. With strings in Java, you'll notice what kind of quotes I'm using. I'm using double quotes. Anytime you're writing a string in Java, it needs to be double quotes. Remember, in JavaScript, it can be either single quotes or double, and it was the same deal. But in Java, a double quote is a string. A single quote is a character, is a single character. So if you want to have a series of characters like this, it needs to be double quotes. If you want just a single character, it would be single quotes. Okay? So I've got my Java program there. Now that I've got that set up, let me go ahead and open up command line here, and I'm doing this by holding Shift and right-clicking. I'm going to say Open PowerShell window here, and then there's a few commands that you can use, tools that are built in with the JDK, which we'll install later. So one of those is Java C, short for Java Compiler, and that's how we compile our code. So in here, I'm going to say Java C space, and then the name of the file that I want to compile. So right now I'm in the Hello World folder. I want to compile Hello World .java. So I'm going to compile that file. Okay. That's going to give me out a file with the same name, but a different extension, right? So hello world.java is my source code. Hello world.class is my byte code. So when you compile Java code, you get class files out of that. Now, if I try to open that up in my text editor, it's not very meaningful, right? I can see a little bit about, some of the code's still kind of there, but can you tell that it's not stuff that's meant to be read and written anymore? Does that make sense?
Yeah. Hey, Mr. Smith, you're recording this, right?
Yep.
Okay.
I believe so. Let me double check that it's actually going. Yep, it's still going. So that's what you get out, is you get this bytecode file, okay? And as we're using IntelliJ, you may not necessarily see these bytecode files because they can be a little bit hidden, but that's kind of what's going on underneath the surface. Is it's constantly it will actually be constantly running Java-C for you to compile your code and turn it into bytecode, which is what we actually run. So once we've compiled it, we can then try to run the program. So to run the program, I type in the command Java. So Java-C is to compile your code. Java is to run your code. So hello world. If I type that in there, I type in, you see the name of the class without the actual extension. And you can see what it's done once it's run the program. What did it do? Well, it printed out hello world, right? And where did that hello world come from? Well, it came from the text that I had here, right? So if I wanted to change that, we could very easily say, well, let's change this to hello class, right? I'm going to save that file here. What happens if I run the program again?
Do you have to recompile it?
I do have to recompile it because I have to, in order to get the new bytecode, I have to compile it again and then run it again. Does that make sense? So the compilation step there is something you have to do. But the good news is once you're dealing with an IDE, the IDE will automatically do that compilation for you when you tell it to run. Cool? Now, what happens if I say have an error in my code, right? So maybe I forget semicolons because semicolons are mandatory in this Java language. What's going to happen there? Well, I can try to compile it now, and what you'll see, you see this error? So it says hello world Java. Any guesses as to what that 3 represents?
The line?
The line number. So it's telling me on line 3, it expected a semicolon and it wasn't there. So if you have an error in your code, you'll get a compilation error because it's happening when it compiles the code. It's happening before it runs it. Make sense? Versus runtime errors would be things that actually happen when your code runs. So for instance, if I say I want to say maybe divide something by 0, then I would get that at compile time, not at runtime. So if I say maybe 3 divided by 0, although I think I might need to put through that 0 into a variable. So int a, and then take 3 to int a is 0, and then take 3 divided by 0. Let's try to compile that. See, I don't get a compiler error, but I will get a runtime error. You see that? So I get what we call I get an exception there. With me?
Yep.
So you'll see compilation errors, you'll see runtime errors. Both of those are obviously things you want to check for and see. But if you got a compile time error, you're not going to be able to run your code, versus a runtime error is going to happen when your code runs, and you're only going to see it once that code runs. So you have to do a little bit more testing to find runtime errors. So that's kind of your quick intro to this is what the world of Java looks like. And I think everybody can agree that this really looks like a C# program, right? The only real difference between this and a C# program is that this is a lowercase m and this is system.println instead of the different, instead of what you wrote. I think it's console.writeLine in C#. Okay? So a lot of the knowledge that you have from C# will transfer over to Java. So we're going to spend some time, reviewing and learning about the Java language, but that's why we're only going to spend about a week. Is because I think you'll catch on to it pretty quickly once we do some review, because the differences are not that big. Cool. All right, so we are at 1:30. We've gone through our basically my mini lecture for today. Now we want to go over some of the policies and procedures and how this course is going to run. But I do want to give people a chance to take a break and stretch your legs. So let's pause here, and we'll come back at 1:50, and we'll go over the syllabus and some of the other pieces. Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Okay. So a few questions to test your knowledge. Which versions of Android are we targeting this semester?
It's 21 through 29.
Good. What language is Java closest to?
C++.
C++.
C#.
C#, C++. Both of those are good answers. It has a lot in common with both of those. Which was developed first, Java or C#?
Java.
Java.
Yeah, it was Java.
Okay. Is Java 5.0 the same as Android 5.0?
No.
Nope.
No. That's an important thing to remember, because your version numbers don't line up. So, what's the first version? What's the latest version of Java that we can support in Android?
5.0.
Almost.
Are you talking about like the most recent Java version?
Most recent version of Android. What's the most version? So in the current version of Android, say API 29, which is Android 11, what version of Java can we support? It's not 15, which is the latest version of Java.
10.
It's Java 8. Okay. So there's something you have to change in Android Studio to be able to even support in Java 8, but that's the latest we can support is Java 8. Java 10 is not supported in Android. Okay.
Yeah. Hey, why the name Java? Did the creators just like coffee a lot, or is there?
I mean, I think it was a late selection if I remember right, but yeah, Java liked the coffee. But if I remember right, that was a pretty late decision what the language name was, and I don't think it really has much to do with it. So I don't really know. But I forget how that name came about. Okay. So let's talk about the syllabus. So the syllabus you'll find, if you're going to inside Ranken, you'll find it on the main page. So if I go into I want to go into AWD 112 and pull up the syllabus. Okay. Now, it looks like the header here did not come through. That's interesting. I may have to export it again. Oh, well. Okay. So, far as syllabus goes, we already talked about this AWD 112 mobile application web development. This is the spring semester. We'll be meeting Monday through Friday, 12:35 to 4:25, as you probably already know. We've planned 80 course sessions. There's 80 sessions planned for this semester. When we do meet in person, we'll be meeting in G203 most of the time. We'll probably still meet in 205 sometimes, but 203 is going to be our main classroom this semester, which is the normal AWD classroom. So if we have days where they're having cert testing, obviously we'll be in 205 for those days. But for the most part, we're going to shoot for being back in 203. Should you need to contact me, all of my contact information is here. Honestly, usually the quickest way to get in touch with me is Discord. But you have my cell phone number and you have my email address here for, if I'm not available on Discord, you could maybe get me over the cell, or if you're having internet connectivity issues, that's my number. And if you're trying to get maybe something that isn't pressing, maybe over email. So my office, should you need to get in touch with me, again, best place to get in touch with me is Discord, especially on days where we're not on campus. But on campus, my office is up in the gray building. It's just the floor above where our classroom is. That's where my office is located. My office hours, I'm generally available between 9 and 12 on any day, on any class day, outside of classroom time. So should you need to or have questions, you can contact me in the morning before class starts, and I'll try and get back with you as quick as I can. So we've got your program level outcomes. I'm sure you're pretty familiar with those by now. So let's talk about the course materials and text that we'll be using.
I like to look up to date there.
Huh?
Program level student outcomes.
Which ones?
JavaScript, HTML, CSS.
That's your first semester.
Oh, okay.
This is, so you got your first semester, you've got your second semester, and then this is like third semester, and I think at some point we had, so we're primarily, the main objective that we're on for this semester is actually going back to that second objective, which is the same one you had for your second semester, focusing on object-oriented programming. So that's kind of our driver there. So as far as textbooks that we're using, you should have probably already purchased this, the Java Syntax Reference. It's a really small book, but I think it's I think 30 pages ish. It's not really big. But it does a really good job of quickly explaining the Java language to you. So you should have gotten that off of eCampus already. I think that, does anybody remember if that's available? Is that a physical book that you got, or was it a digital book that you got?
I got the digital.
Okay.
I didn't really.
Okay. Because I feel like I remember, I think the bookstore only has that in digital form at the moment.
It only has it in digital. You can order it in physical.
Okay. I just don't know that the bookstore has any physical copies.
They had like 3 in stock. I ordered it yesterday.
Okay, cool. Okay, so hopefully you have that. We'll try and go over that next week, starting on, I think, Wednesday is my plan to go over this around Wednesday next week. So looking at this class schedule, we'll basically rush through that on Thursday, and we'll talk about that on Thursday and Wednesday and Thursday next week is the main time we're gonna focus on that book. But it's also just it's so short, it's easy to kind of go back to it anytime you have questions about how Java works. You can easily open it up and look those things up. So the main part of the course, though, that we'll be using is this Android Developer Fundamentals course. There's a number of different pages and resources that come with this. But if you start from the overview, that will take you to a lot of the different resources that go into it. So you've got the kind of overview. It says in the Android Developer Fundamentals, you'll notice this is actually from developer.android.com. So this is actually produced by Google. You'll learn the basic Android programming concepts and build a variety of apps using the Java programming language. You start with Hello World and then kind of work from there. This course does presume that you have some knowledge of Java, which is it doesn't really teach Java per se, which is why we're going to cover Java before we jump into it. And then, so it was created by the Google Developers Training Team. To take the course, you need to know a little bit about Java. There are code labs, which is what you'll be doing primarily for some of your lab assignments. I will also be giving you additional labs on top of that. because these are pretty. The code labs, they basically tell you to do what to do step by step by step. So I'll be giving you some additional labs as we go through that are more free form in terms of like what I want, what to build. So those code labs will come with this. Those are pretty easy to work with. Again, they're kind of step-by-step instructions. There's also a textbook that comes with this called The Concepts. And that's available here as a Git book. I've pulled this all down though and put it up on Perusal, which is where I want you to read it. Two things that will do, as long as you're reading it on Perusal, then it will track the time and also allow you to give comments on it. That will mean as long as you want to read that concepts book over on the Perusal side, because otherwise if you read it here on their website, you won't get credit for it. So that's there. All of their slide decks are up on Google Drive, so you can get those as well. It's worth noting these versions of the slides are for version 2 of this course. The actual videos that we're going to be doing, the recorded lectures that they did, are actually on version 1 of the course. So these slides may not line up with the videos that we'll watch. Does that make sense? Unfortunately. So I'll go over as we're watching that some of the differences between the two. And we'll have to line a few things up because of that. But you can also find the videos for this are over. There's a whole playlist, and I put all of these again on Perusal. So that's kind of the main textbook basically for our course is going to be this Android development, the developer course. And we can kind of look at, I kind of mentioned the units. So you got Unit 1, getting started, Unit 2, user experience, working in the background, saving user data. So you can, if you want to find out more about how this is kind of laid out, the overview page is a really good place to start looking at what's going to be covered. So that's our textbook, primarily. In addition to the Java syntax reference, which we'll spend a little bit of time on, we'll spend most of our time with this Android developer course. Cool? So that's all free. There's nothing you have to pay for this portion of it. So that's the only textbook that you need to buy. Course level student outcomes. Things that we'd like you to be able to do by the time you get done with this. And I guess I haven't updated the course name here because it says Application Programming with Java, which this should actually be Mobile Application Development. There. So we'll talk about building apps with Android apps with Android Studio, and in making those respond to events, same way like you're familiar with responding to events with, say, jQuery or you did in C#. We'll deal with a bunch of different UI controls, text views, edit text, buttons, images, spinners, recycler view, all of those kind of things. We'll also be making apps that can have more than one screen, multiple screens, and pass data between those. We actually learned that pretty early. So that will be in the first 2 weeks, I believe, of our Android section of Unit 1. We'll talk about using themes, styles, dimensions, XML, colors, strings, XML, etc. All those resource files that go into building and potentially even internationalizing a app so it can maybe be used in Spanish or other languages. So we'll talk about that. It's not really CSS like you're familiar with doing with web development. The way that we style things in Android is a different paradigm. So that'll take a little bit of getting used to.
Is it XHTML that you style things in?
It's a bunch of XML files, not XHTML, XML.
XML, yeah. Just like Swift, yeah. Okay. So
all the resource files are XML. It's not as fully featured as CSS. CSS can do a lot more things than what all of these XML resources can do, but they're still pretty powerful. So include, and we'll talk about a little bit about databases and OOP principles, and then we'll also talk about web services when we get to Volley, which will be Unit 5. Okay, so we're going to do this in a hybrid format I've already mentioned. We're going to meet Monday through Friday, 12:35 to 4:25. You can see the calendar on Inside Ranken for the details on which days are in person and which days are virtual. As you're looking at the calendar, this top cell here, this top row, you see where it says location Discord classroom and it says location G203. That's how you're going to tell where we're going to meet, right? So you can see for this tomorrow, where are we meeting?
Discord classroom.
Discord classroom. What's our first day in person?
Tuesday,
next week. Okay. So Tuesday and Thursday next week we'll be meeting in person. The rest of the next week after that, we got a holiday on Monday, and we won't be meeting in person that week is the plan. I may still make arrangements with people to meet them in person on this week, especially to get tablets if for whatever reason you don't get a tablet either Tuesday or Thursday. So I may be on campus that week at some point anyway, but we're not planning to be on campus there. And then we'll go back to Tuesday and Thursday the week thereafter. Pickup dates. What are you looking at?
For the tablets? Tuesday, Thursday?
Tuesday, Thursday. Knowing that people have, sometimes, if you feel sick, then you should stay home. So creating some more just availability there for, if you can't make it Tuesday, then maybe you can make it Thursday. Does that make sense? That's why the 2 dates are there. Preferably everybody can come and pick it up on Tuesday, but we don't formally start Android until the 19th. That's when you'll need the tablet. So there's not really a big difference between the picking it up on Tuesday and picking it up on Thursday. So. But yeah, so I expect most people will pick it up on the 12th, and maybe I'll have a few people pick it up on the 14th. So that's where you can find our calendar, and that will be updated as things go on. Obviously note if wherever things go with the pandemic, if we need to transition to an online format, then we will. And we'll just continue proceeding with things in the Discord channel. If you're looking for it, I think everybody's in the Discord channel already, but there's the invite if you lose it or need to connect with a different device. I've also got a link to my YouTube channel where you'll find all of my lectures. Students are expected to attend all scheduled course sessions. Students are also expected to arrive on time and remain for the whole duration of the course sessions. You are responsible for monitoring the attendance record on Inside Ranken. Sometimes I do get things wrong. Sometimes I do mark people absent accidentally when they are present. So do keep a mind on that. I would ask and stress that, try to be in person anytime that you as much as you can, because I do know from last semester that my students that were more in person generally did better than those ones that were purely virtual. So the more you can be on campus, the better. Obviously, we've kind of got limited days that we are being on campus, but please take advantage of those to seek out help and such. We can do pretty much everything virtual. The catch is, obviously I can't be there if you're purely virtual to encourage you to spend time working. I can't look over your shoulder, encourage you not to goof off, or to, or it's a little bit harder to see if you're going in the wrong direction or having trouble in the virtual setting. So, if you're physical, then I can kind of look over your shoulder and see, hey, oh, you need help. But when it's digital, you basically have to contact me. Otherwise, I don't know if you're having trouble or you're just moving along smoothly. That being said, we don't want you to feel pressured to attend seated courses, especially when you're not feeling well. So we don't want you to exceed absences because of feeling sick or whatnot. So the way that we enforce our attendance policy is kind of the same way as, it's very similar to how it was last semester, in that we're going to modify it a little bit from what it was. So rather than it being based on the fact that you're present or not, it's going to be based on participation, whether that participation is virtual or online, or whether it's in person. That's what your attendance will be based on. So your attendance, I'll record it at the end of every class session. Normally I would record it at the start of the class session, but with where things are at, I think it's going to be just easier for me to record it at the end. Your attendance this semester is going to be based on you committing and pushing code to GitHub. Last semester we had done it based on screenshots, uploading a daily screenshot. We're not going to be doing that this semester. We're just going to go back to GitHub and say, I need you to push some code every day. Okay.
How are you going to monitor that for today?
How I'm going to monitor that for today. So for day, I don't expect you to push any code because we're just getting started. What I'm going to take as your attendance today is stuff, your activity on Perusal. So what I'd like you to do on Perusal is we've got the day one slides and we've got the setup instructions. That's what's listed here. What I'd like you to do is comment on either the, setting up dev environment or installing the SDK, the JDK. I'd like you to comment on one of those two for your attendance today. Is that cool?
Yeah, I noticed we got 3 thoughtful comments for full credit now.
Yes. Yeah, I have moved it up a little bit. That I'd like to see a few more comments than people were giving. And I'll talk about that when we get to Perusal about what that's going to be. But yes, on the assignments, I would expect 3 comments. I think I had started out as 1 last semester, but I have moved it up to 3 because I didn't feel like they were spread out enough over the document.
Yeah, how does that work when it's only like 2 pages long?
That
There's
means
not a lot to talk about.
Yeah. Well, if you look at your grade on Perusal, if you look at the way I'm filtering it in on Inside Ranken, let me actually just pull it up. That one, yes, is short, and so the way I'm going to grade that one's going to be a little bit different. So normally I would grade that using the Perusal grade. I'm not going to be using the Perusal grade for that particular assignment. So if you look at the rubric on Perusal 00, which is on Inside Ranken, you'll see there's some stuff here. So the way to get the grade on that, I want you to just complete the setup steps. That's what I want you to do, is finish the steps. And then you just need to prove to me, show me you've done all the things in those instructions, and I'm not going to use the grade from Perusal for that.
How do you want us to prove that to you? Like screen share later on, or?
Just record screenshots as you're doing it and send me those screenshots when you're done. Cool.
What if we already have half that stuff already set up? Like I have all that except Android Studio. I have IntelliJ, I have everything.
We have most of it set up. You still can take screenshots as you're going back through it to verify that things are actually installed correctly. So things like you can give me a snapshot of the version number. If the version number is the current version number, then you're good. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But I would advise you to go through all the instructions anyway, because at least that will make sure that you're up to the latest versions. Does that make sense? So that will make sure your notepad's up to date. That will make sure all your Git tooling is up to date. Because you may have it installed, but you may have an older version of it installed.
Okay. And you want us to provide screenshots of like us joining the Discord too, or?
I don't need any screenshots for that. I see you're here already.
Yeah, I was just saying because it's on the setup, so I was curious if you needed that.
So if you look at perusal, I've uploaded my check sheet.
Oh, okay. I was looking at the wrong place.
Yeah, so the specific instructions of how to do it is in this file. Set up your dev environment, install the SDK in the Android Studio. Those are the steps that you need to go through. But as far as what I'm going to be checking, here is the list of things that I'm checking. So if you're looking at what things that you would want to provide screenshots or proof for, those are the things that you want to provide evidence for, is the stuff down here. The GitHub profile, I can once you've joined the assignment, I can just go look at that myself, so you don't need to provide a screenshot for that. I've got a way to see who's already joined the classroom, so I don't need a screenshot for that. Same thing for the Discord. But this is all the stuff that I'm checking for, okay? So what I would expect is a screenshot for all the steps beneath that one. Does that make sense?
So for this week, there's no commenting required.
Right.
On just the pictures this week.
Just the screenshots.
Until Friday.
Yep, just
and then
screenshots.
When we're commenting on this for today and tomorrow's attendance.
Mm-hmm. So,
right.
So attendance will be in there. Let me go back and look. We'll go ahead and start. Our plan is to start writing our first programs tomorrow. So that's where you want to have IntelliJ installed, because we're going to use IntelliJ tomorrow as we go through the Mosh series. So that's the, let's see, going back here. So that's what I'm going to do as far as the perusal grade is concerned. Actually, I don't know that I probably don't need to put a grade on that. Yeah, I don't need to put a grade on that. I'm going to drop that. Delete this.
Yeah, something else too. I just logged into Perusal and I still see the old course. I don't see the new one there. Is there we get to go to a new course, or is there something else?
Yeah, so what you should do, if you're in, you should be going up to the top here. You see the name of the course?
Okay.
Click on the Perusal logo itself, and it should bring you back to something like this. Do you see that?
Yeah, I just have nothing under my courses. Yeah. And I just have the data-driven web development under my archive courses.
You just need to click on Enroll in a Course.
And just put 1112.
No, I have this. We haven't gotten to it yet, but I've got there's a code that you'll put into here as the course code.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a course code. Yeah, that's what Jonathan just posted it. That's the course code that you want to put in there. That's how you join the course. So for day and tomorrow, we'll do that based on your perusal comments or sending me screenshots. But from there on out, it'll be based on committing code to GitHub daily. Because I want to see that people are actually working on the assignments. And we're going to be moving at quick enough pace that if you're not committing something daily, you're going to be falling behind. So that's what we're going to do there. There are no tardies designations for the semester. Also given that normally we would give the tardies for leaving earlier or arriving late. There is a factor for arriving early and arriving late, and we'll talk about that when we get to work ethic. There is some points off in terms of work ethic for that, but there's not going to be tardy designations. Maximum allowed absences for this course is 6. Should you get to the 7th absence, that's where I have to file a course dismissal form, and which ends up removing you from the course. You can, however, appeal that, and you can look at the student handbook, and we can talk about that if you should come there. So it's not a definite, that you're going to get removed at 7. You can appeal that to try and get that overturned, but please please don't go over 6, and ideally, please don't go over 3. So students will be allowed. You can make up reasonable academic work because of an absence, whether that be homework, quizzes, or tests. There'll be a bunch of different ways to make that up. So if you get into that boat where you're maybe not going to be there on a test day, or going to be late, or going to miss the test for whatever reason, then we can potentially give it to you early or later to make it up. Students won't be dismissed for medical reasons. If you do have a medical reasons for an absence, please let me know so we can get that recorded. If you do get a 0.2, you have a high number of absences for medical reasons, then there are options in the compassionate or medical withdrawal that we can talk about should that occur. So policies specifically, I mean, we're governed by everything in the student handbook, including the rules on appearance and the like. So you can read up on those current rules in the student handbook. There are some specific policies for the ID department, and this covers any time we're in the classroom. And it's hard to it's going to be hard to enforce. We don't really it's not really possible to enforce this digitally, but if you are in the classroom, G203, G205, these rules will apply. We don't want you to watch streaming in videos unless it's for class. So you watch programming related stuff, that's okay, but not gaming, sports, etc. If you're going to play video games, do it in the hallway, don't do it in the classroom. Cell phones, please keep them off or in your pocket while we're in the classroom. If you do need to take a call, please go ahead and step out of the classroom and take it, because they can be pretty disruptive. You can wear earbuds, listen to music. That's completely up to you, but please avoid the noise canceling headphones so that we can still get your attention. If you are wearing headphones in class, you need to wear dress shoes, no tennis shoes, business appropriate dress socks are a must. No excessive jewelry, no hoodies. Just remember, we're in winter now. It gets cold. I know people wear hoodies and coats when you're outside. Remember to take those off immediately when you get into the classroom. So that's that. We have normally a rule about 5 absences or more is immediately a needs improvement. I'm not following that rule. I'm not enforcing that rule this time through for your work ethic, because of the hybrid nature of things, of how absences are counted differently, and B, because we're going to be doing something a little bit different from our work ethic standpoint this semester, and we'll talk about that. So that's not in play right now. Academic honesty, about this. We've talked about this several times. Your code needs to be, the code that you turn into me needs to be your code. It needs to be not stuff you found online, whether it's on Stack Overflow or whatnot. Even the tiniest amount of code that somebody else's is still plagiarism. It doesn't matter if it's a one-line method, it's still plagiarism if it's not code you wrote. Is that clear? So make sure that all the code that you turn in is your own. So as far as course grading goes, we are going back to a traditional scheme this semester. We're not going to be doing the mastery grading thing. That turned out to be a lot more complicated than I thought it would be last semester. So I'm going to go back to my traditional scheme this time. So waiting for the different assignments, you'll notice perusal here right now is 20%. That is a bigger deal. And part of the reason that it's worth that much now is I've noticed that Students who spend more time doing the reading do better, and they get through the assignments quicker. I think that, if you spend the time doing and learning the theory before you start the work, you get through the work a lot faster and a lot more efficiently. So that's where I'm pushing that perusal up to 20%. That being said, I've also dropped all the written tests. So your perusal, the annotations that you put there, your commentary and your discussion is basically I'm taking that over a written test because I feel like I get better. I get a better read and more out of people discussing the text than I get in asking you a written test. Does that make sense? So take that time that you would normally have spent filling out the written test, take it discussing things on perusal instead, discussing the text and the assignments and lectures, etc. So your perusal is 20% of your grade. Homework quizzes, which you'll have one basically every week. Those are going to be worth 10% of your grade. Labs are 20%. Hands-on tests are 40%. And the final project is going to be 10%. So that puts us at about 30% theory, which is the perusal and the homework quizzes. And then the rest of that 70% is hands-on, which is where I kind of like to have my weighting is primarily very much focused on the hands-on with a little bit of weight into the theory. Cool? So I'd really stress don't skip on doing the reading and perusal and the annotations there because it will really hurt you. Grading scale, we're usual Ranken letter grade. C starts at 75%. Corey, you had something to say?
Sorry, I'm using my control.
Okay, no problem. So pay attention to those things. Workload table. My general expectation is how this course will run is we'll have an hour or two of lecture usually is where I want to try and keep it to the rest of that day. So most of the times it'll be an hour or two of lecture one day, and then it'll be the rest of the class period and the next day working on labs. So usually, 1 hour of theory to 3 hour of lab is where I want it to be. Recognize that you're not going to get all of the lab work, and there's some more reading that you'll need to do outside of classroom. So, make sure that you budget time to do stuff outside of classroom, at least 2 hours a day for every, class that we're in. So that means, plan for having at least 10 hours a week out of class that you're going to need to get this material done. Cool? So Inside Ranken, you know about how to look at your grades and such on Inside Ranken. Perusal, so there's the account, there's the code that you'll want to go through to get signed up. So that's what you're going to put in as the course code. So if I look at my course, I can see who's joined already. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9. Cool. So everybody's in. That's awesome. All your coding assignments will be submitted through GitHub, as you're really familiar with. One of the things I want to do a little bit differently this semester is I don't want to do all of your assignments in one GitHub repo. So we're actually going to break it out into a separate GitHub, a separate repo for every unit, which means at the end of the semester you'll have about 7 repos, not just one. Okay? So please commit and push your work every day, regardless of whether or not it's done. I really, really want to see, hey Watson, I really want to see your work in progress. Rather than a big commit or turn in at the end of the assignment, I want to see that daily in work progress. Every little step of forward progress you go ahead and commit it. Your work ethic grade is more than likely going to be affected. Will have an effect attendance will factor into that frequency. As we talked about, your attendance is based on that, submitting something to GitHub every day. So when it comes to hands-on tests, the hands-on tests have to be uploaded by the due date. Do make sure that it's committed and pushed before the end of class. If you do the test but don't upload it to GitHub, I'm going to count it as late. So make sure that you get it turned in the day that we do it. If I can't download it and run it, then the assignment will be counted as not completed and will be counted as late. One thing I really want to stress, we're going to install Android Studio this week. From there on out, do not update Android Studio. And the reason I want to stress that is because there is no way to downgrade Android Studio. If you update it, you cannot downgrade it to an older version. It's not possible. There are ways to make your projects act as if they're running on an older version, but you cannot actually downgrade Android Studio. So what that means is if you update Android Studio, you're going to be in a boat where your code, I can't actually run it. Does that make sense? Because it's going to require a newer version of Android Studio than what I have installed. And unfortunately, if I update my version of Android Studio, then everybody else also has to update, because then I have to update their projects, everybody's projects, in order to be able to open them. Does that make sense?
Shout out to Google for making a great IDE.
Yeah, well, I don't know that it's entirely Google's fault, because Google doesn't technically own Android Studio. Android Studio is kind of a version of IntelliJ. So I would blame IntelliJ more for that. So there is a lot of compatibility stuff that exists there, and it's really amazing what they've done in terms of compatibility. But both, the last 2 times that I've run this Android course, I've had students midway to the end of the semester who have updated Android Studio, and then I've had problems with, getting their projects running because of that. So we've had to, make manual changes to the files and actually to do it.
Did you say what the correct version is? How do we get that correct version?
We'll update it to the correct version today. So whatever the current version is that is available right now is the version that we'll use. So I would, we can walk through the instructions to install it, and then you can look at what those are. I can pull up mine to see what I have installed, but I'm probably going to go ahead and update mine just to make sure that I have the same version that you do. Sometimes students get into the thing that's like, well, it's having these bugs and it's not working for me, and I read online that updating it will fix it. Updating it will not fix it, trust me. So whatever version of Android Studio we get every version of Android Studio has its own bugs. The upside of everybody being on the same version is I hear about all those bugs from all the students. So once we hear about those and we figure out what the fixes are, I can then spread that information to everybody else to say, oh, well, here's how you get around that, right? But if some people are one version of Android and Studio and other people are on others, then it's a little bit of a problem. So the version that I'm on right now is 4.1.1.
Is that the one in setting up your environment?
That will be the second part of it. So go through setting up your dev environment, and then go through the JDK and Android Studio IntelliJ install. So it'll tell you to pull down the latest version. The latest version right now should be 4.1.1. If it's not, I'll update to whatever the current one is. But I reinstalled Android Studio just a week or 2 ago, so that should be close to it. I know that they release updates pretty frequently, though. So, late work, I do accept late work up until 5 class days later, but for every day it's late, I'm going to take off 10%. So that includes things like if you're running a different version of Android Studio, that means I can't download and run your application, right? So if you update Android Studio and now you're running a different version of Android, that runs you into that risk of having your assignments being counted late because I couldn't open them. Okay. So general college information you can find down on the last page. There's a note on snow days and such. Because of the nature of our work and because it can be done entirely virtual, even if there's a snow day, expect us to still be working and having class that day. Okay. Evan's doing the same thing on that front. So if you get a notice that there is snow, that the campus is closed, okay, don't come to campus, but we're still going to have class. There's still going to be work for you to do. We'll just have it virtually. So unless otherwise notified, assume that we're going to have classes. Okay, so that's talking about the syllabus. Any questions on the syllabus? I know people are asking questions about Android Studio still. Any questions outstanding?
I'm just hoping when I go to do all the stuff I need to check the box for attendance, I can find all that. I kind of have an idea. It's not all perusal, though.
Okay. You're saying it's not all on perusal?
Oh, no. I mean, just figuring out what I need to do, like getting set up and all that. I'll just kind of feel it as I go along.
Yeah. I think I've got the instructions pretty much step by step. Everything that you need to do laid out. Okay, so we talked about the syllabus. Let's talk about work ethic. So there's been an initiative on the Ranken side to try and get our work ethic grades for different technical programs and such to be the same and kind of standardized. So this semester, I've signed us up to use that standardized work ethic grading system. So that's what we will be using. So let me go over what that means briefly here. So if you're looking on Inside Ranken, you should have 2 courses listed. You should have the AWD 112 application programming, which is the main course. But there's also a work ethic course that goes along with it, right? So no, this is not the right one. AWD 111. No. Yes, this is the one. So this is the work ethic class that you should be seeing on Inside Ranken. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
So under there, it'll kind of do some explanation of how this is going to work. So your work ethic grade is in 2 parts. The first part is a log of events, of things that, significant things that have happened throughout the semester. So that will be one part of your grade, and that's actually 75% of your grade is that log of events. The other 25% is assessed on each of the 5 core work ethic attributes. So, pride and performance is 5%, ability to get along with others, positive attitude, respect for workplace structure, honesty. Those are all 5% each. So the log of events, you're going to start at a grade of 86%, which corresponds to a meet expectation grade. From there on out, every event will either add to or subtract to that number. So there's a few different things that can cause an addition, 1 to 5 points. And there's some other things that can also cause you to lose points on that. So we'll be constantly, working with that. I'll be updating that on a weekly basis with additional events or things that I've noticed. And then the overall, your 5 attributes will be assessed twice throughout the semester. The first time will be around day 40. If I do forget about that, please remind me. So you'll get an initial grade on day 40. That grade on day 40 is not final. That's just to give you some feedback on where you're at so far. On day 80, we'll do a final assessment of those 4 between day 70 and day 80. We'll do a final assessment on that. That's going to be the final grade that applies. Your grade on day 40 for this will just be here's where you're at right now, give you another 40 days to improve. Cool? So that's what you'll see. So if you're looking at the coursework in there, you should see that there's a work ethic log. Does everybody see the work ethic log?
Yep.
And you should see that everybody has a grade of 86 on there right now. So as things go on, if I notice things, that'll go up and down. And then you should also see that there's these 5 other categories here as well. Now let me go into the student view, so I'm looking at it the same way that you are. So you'll see each of these have basically you have a rubric with different points. So there's an exceeds. Most of these add up to 50 points. So exceeds, meets, needs improvement, D&M on a few different scales. So effectively, you'll get a grade on each of those things, and that will then come to that 25% of your grade. Okay. So let's look at the work ethic log. Now, this is one of those things that, I think that is probably the biggest thing that we may need to look at from our side, because, maybe there's some additional things that should be counted here as positives because of the industry that we're working with. So there may be, I feel like there's another thing or two potentially that I'd like to add on here. In any other semester, I would definitely add on here things like coming to industry events. I would include that as a +1, but given that, COVID, pandemic, things are not being, things are what they are, not necessarily as much there. So let's look at what things you can get positive or additional points for. So +1 for any time if I see an instance where I see that you're going above and beyond in any one of these areas: pride and performance, ability to get along with other, positive attitude, respect for workplace, honesty. That's a place where you can get a +1. So you can get a point to that, which raises your score there on the event log. Completing tasks outside of the normal class time when asked by the instructor. So those are also things you can get a +1. Obviously, I normally expect you to get stuff out of class, so that would be a very special case. About what that means, that's not real clear to me on what they mean, but that would definitely be something that would be abnormal. Completing tasks without being asked, that's something that would get you a +1. Assisting others without being asked, that's also there. Volunteering with extracurricular activities. If you are doing something extracurricular, with Ranken that's outside of class, let me know about it, because I may not know what you're doing outside of class, but let me know, because those are things that would be worth extra credit. If you're attending any sort of student meeting, whether it's the student government, diversity inclusion body, or the Phi Theta Kappa group, hey, give me some documentation about, you were here on this date and, and what part you played on that, and that's worth points as well, because it shows engagement. Anything that you do in terms of tutoring or a study group, if we want to set up something like that, which would be maybe a good idea. If somebody wants to head up that study group, just let me know, and I think I've already created a channel here for it if anybody wants to head that up. But attending that would count as a +1 to your work ethic. Anything that you do for helping out our open houses, which usually happen about twice a semester, I think. Those would count as a +5, so there's a lot of points to be gained there. We're always looking for a little bit of help for those events. Those have been largely virtual because of current situations, so how of those are operating is a little bit different than they would usually be, but those are places there. I've also added a +2 for reporting instances of plagiarism and cheating. Reason being, sometimes things happen. Sometimes, somebody's, asking somebody for the answer or solution for this. If that happens, please let me know. Because I'd much rather know, what's going on and have a chance to talk to that person and figure out what's there. Just to keep things honest. Because I know sometimes people hear things, or, I've had students where student A asked them for, this student B asked them for code, and they may have said yes, they might have said no, but either way, I definitely prefer to get that reported to me. And if you do, there's a work ethic bump in there, because it's better to me that you tell me that that's going on rather than I don't know that it's going on. On the negative side, are kind of obvious things that are bad: fighting weapons on campus, stealing, being under the influence, whether it be drugs or alcohol, academic honesty. The first case of academic dishonesty would be a -15 on your work ethic grade. Cases past that are a -50. So keep that in mind. Threatening student instructor, property damage, racist, sexist comments, yada yada yada. So there's some negatives in there. There's some also more minors. So not having your mask on correctly would be a PPE infraction of a -2. Driving appearance, absences, you'll notice, have a different level. So if it's an absence that I don't know about, that you missed that day and I don't know why you missed that day, that's a -2. But if you let me know ahead of time, especially, or that day why you're gone, that goes down to a -1 instead of a -2. And if it's for quarantine reasons, then it becomes a 0, right? You don't lose points for it if it's due to quarantine. Does that make sense, Sheridan? So if you are going to be absent, if something else is going on and you can't make it, definitely let me know, because that's going to have a different impact on your work ethic grade if I know that you're not going to be there, rather than it's just, well, they weren't here this day. Wasting materials, I don't think particularly applies to us, because we don't really use per se materials. Leaving a cluttered area, just on the days we're in person, please, leave it nicer than what it was when you left, when you got there, So making sure the docs and the monitors and everything are put back in order before you leave. That's what that's about.
All right, I have a question.
Yep.
So I work in the afternoons at my job.
Yep.
And I start at 4:30. Our class technically ends at 4:25, I believe.
Yep.
If I leave at 4:20, is that going to be considered leaving early?
Normally it would, but I'll give you a pass on that, because I know where you're going to. That's fine.
All right.
But yeah, normally that would be considered leaving early. But yeah, if you're leaving at 4:20, I get it.
I just need time to walk across campus to get to actual clocking in.
Yeah. No, I get it, and that's fine. So that's what the work ethics grading system looks like. So overall, it shouldn't be too different from what you're familiar with. This work ethic, the log is going to be new to both me. The log of events is going to be new to me and you. But other than that, it's pretty much what you're used to. So going back here, so we talked about work ethic, talked about appearance standards you can find in the student handbooks, pages 23 to 25. But I think we didn't really have I didn't see any appearance issues last year. Biggest thing I would focus on is, beards is always a problem when it comes into winter because students want to grow their beards out. Please, remember to stay clean shaven. If you have a beard already, then keep it, but make sure it's groomed. And if you're going to be clean shaven, then you're going to plan to shave on a daily basis. That's that plus the winter garments. Remember, hoodies are not allowed in the IT classroom, so make sure that you take off any coats or jackets when you get into the classroom and specifically before you even sit down.
What if my coat doesn't have a hoodie? Do I still need to remove it?
Generally, yeah, we still expect that. But I think generally the interpretation that I've heard from other instructors is usually to leave that on your chair. Obviously that means that, it's going to be cold. So but we have control over the temperature. There's the thermostat is in the room. So if you feel cold, we can turn it up. I know that sometimes those classrooms are colder than they should be. And so it's not unusual for me to turn them up a few degrees. Cool. So if you're cold enough that you feel like you need a coat, then we can just turn the temperature up.
How high does the temperature go?
I think it can go hot enough. I've been in there where it was. I think it can get up to 75 or 80. So it can definitely get pretty hot in there.
Yeah, 80 every day, boys.
But 80 is kind of too high. But I know that it can definitely get up to the point where it's like, oh, this is too much. So, yeah. So if you're feeling cold, let me know. We'll turn the temperature up. That way, that won't be a problem. So, as far as COVID-19, just a few reminders. If you're feeling sick or have been exposed, you need to notify your instructor and stay home. Don't come to class if you have any symptoms whatsoever. And if you remember that there's quite a few different symptoms for COVID-19. So who can recite what are some of those symptoms that might indicate COVID-19?
I got this. Diarrhea. Fever, chills, anything like a cold, flu, runny nose, coughing, troubles breathing, vomiting. Basically anything that can go wrong means COVID.
Yeah. Or fatigue, feeling tired. If for any reason you don't feel 100%, just stay home and let me know.
I thought those were symptoms of Node.js.
If what?
I thought those were symptoms of Node.js.
No. Come on. But if you do feel sick for any reason, then stay home. If on the other hand, let's say you've had a COVID test that came up positive, or you've been exposed or near somebody who has been tested positive for COVID-19, also definitely stay home. Stay home for at least 2 weeks since you were exposed. Or in the case of you're sick, well, obviously stay home until you're 100% better. But in that case, if you actually have COVID-19 or have been around somebody that's COVID-19, then we need to contact Shannon and let her know, so that if so we can, potentially need to pass on the word to other students that may have been in the area, or have additional cleaning happen in the classroom to make sure that it, doesn't pass to anybody else. Cool. So there's kind of a line there between, hey, I just feel sick. Well, then you just stay home. But if you know it's COVID-19, then we have some additional steps that we need to take. Your masks need to be worn properly at all times while you're on campus, including the parking lot. So make sure you're doing that. You can't just take the mask off when you're in the hallway or when you're or when you get outside. The mask needs to remain on the whole time that you're on campus. And the full current guidelines, you can find them on this page that's linked here, COVID-19 Information and Resources. So if you want to read up full on all the rules and recommendations, you can find that on that page.
Eating and drinking is still fine, I believe, correct?
Yeah, you can still take your mask off for eating and drinking, but please remember to, obviously put it on immediately when you're done. So, just a reminder for proper mask wearing, your mask does need to be covering both your nose and your mouth. So having it below your nose like that, that's not acceptable. Having it not tight, properly arranged, it shouldn't be slack like that. It should be tight on all sides. Cool. And obviously, as we kind of mentioned with work ethic, if you're violating that policy, that can go against your work ethic grade, and I believe was a -2 to that log of events for every occurrence of it. Your textbook and reading assignments, those will all be through perusal, which it looks like everybody's joined now. You got the course code there. Should you be looking for documentation for the Java API, which I would absolutely recommend, because the API docs are actually really, really good for Java. Not as much Android. They're still good, but they're not as good for Android as they are for Java. You can go read up on any class that exists in the framework and find out how it works, what methods there are, what are the inputs and outputs, what are the expected behaviors. You can find all of that in the Java API docs. So, for instance, here's the link to the regular Java API docs. This is for API 15. And you can read about any of the classes. So we start up here. They've got packages, so you can go by the package and then look at a specific class. So for instance, Java.lang is a really common one. Why am I not seeing Java.lang? Or has it moved? Have they moved there? Oh, okay. There we go. So Java.lang is a package that has a lot of the common things that you'll be using. So for instance, you want to know all the methods on a string. We can go look them up in here. There's a good write-up about, what are strings and how do they behave up here. And you can look at the, constructors, all of the methods of the string class, and such. So if, let's say I want to find out how substring works, I can click in here on either of these overloads. So one that takes one number or two numbers, and it'll tell me all the specifics of what that is. So for instance, it takes 2 parameters and begin index, end index, and then it returns, specified substring and exceptions it can throw. So this documentation is really, really helpful. I can't stress how much value this has. When I was learning Java, this is my go-to, and I was in here all the time looking and reading up about stuff. So that's the link to the Java API docs. There's also a similar set of API documentation for Android. And this is where I would, once we start week 2, this is where I would spend most of your time, because this will be the actual APIs for Android, which again are not exactly the same as Java. The other thing you'll notice once you get in here, it's kind of a similar sort of setup where you can see, by package and go look at specific classes. So if I'm looking for that same class, it would be java.lang. So you've got Android package and you've got Java packages. So java.lang, classes, and let's say I want to look at string. So I'm going to find the same kind of documentation here. It's going to kind of tell me what a string is, how it behaves, tell me about all the constructors that are available and all the methods that are available. So if I go back to the same one that we looked over on the Java side, I can also find substring here and see, okay, so it's the same kind of thing. Cool. It's worth noting when you're looking at this documentation, there's an additional thing over in the Android documentation. You see this says added in API level 1. Does everybody see that?
Yeah.
So that tells you when it was introduced to the framework. So if it says API level 1, that means it's been here since the beginning. So any version of Android is going to have it. But you may find other things where you say it says, well, it's only available in API 24 or later. That means you can't use that unless you're supporting API 24 or later. There's some ways around that, but there are some APIs that you may get into, and it's like, well, it's not supported in API 21. So there's some workarounds you may have to do for things like that. So do pay attention to what APIs is it available in, but that information you'll find over here. You won't find that if you're looking at the regular Oracle's Java documentation. You can also look here. There's a drop down for the specific API level. So let's say you're targeting API 20. You can actually pick that from there, and then it'll change the documentation to reflect what was the documentation, what was the API looking, what did it look like back in API level 20. So that can be very helpful for debugging and figuring out in some of those areas where things have changed over time. Okay, so that's how you can get to the documentation for the Android API docs or the Java API docs. As you've seen, maybe there's quite a few classes in the Java API. If you're looking through the whole Java API, you'll find that there's several hundreds of classes in the Java API, and even developers that have been developing software in Java for years, for a decade, don't know the entirety of that API. It's just so big that nobody can know the whole thing. And some of the things are just so specialized that if you're not working in that specific area, you would never use it. So one of the things that I've done is compiled a list of commonly used Java classes. So rather than kind of going through and looking at all of the bazillion classes that are there and in the Java world, if you look in Perusal, you see this document, commonly used Java classes. It's due January 15th.
Okay.
So if you pop that open, what you'll see is a list of classes that I've compiled that are the classes that you'll need most, especially for your first week of labs and going in further on in the semester. These are the classes that will cover most of what you need to know. So as you're looking through the documentation, I would focus on those classes. So the first set of classes are just the basic ones that you need to know for almost any program you write. So system, as we've already seen, that's part of how you write things out to the console, and it's actually part of reading things in as well. So system is a really important one. Class scanner is how you read input from the console. So you want to use that. and get familiar with that. Strings, obviously, we do a lot of strings. String builder is really helpful for improving efficiency of our applications anytime you're working with, dynamically putting strings together. Character represents a single character. We haven't talked about box types, but these are all box types: character, integer, double. So those are important because there's methods there, for instance, to parse a number. So you get it in from the console, you're going to get it in as a string. You need to turn it into an integer or a double. You can use these to do it. Math has a bunch of useful utilities for working with numbers, whether that be needing the pi constant or rounding numbers or taking the floor, the seal, etc. All those kind of common functionalities, min, max, those are all available on the math class. And then finally, in those set of basic classes that you should know is random, which allows you to generate random numbers. There is a method on the math class that will give you random numbers. Don't use it. Use the random class instead. Because it is actually better than the one that's available on the math class. Then down working with collections, think lists and arrays and such. Java.util.arrays has a bunch of useful methods, collections, etc. And then finally, once you kind of get through all that, there's a more advanced section which was introduced in Java 8, something called the Stream API, which is really good with working with especially large amounts of data or complicated operations. So these we won't touch as much, but they're worth knowing about because there's a lot of problems you can solve really slickly with classes in the Stream API. Cool. So that hopefully will give you some guidance as to where to look for what classes you might need to use in solving your problems. Cool. Because otherwise it's very easy to get lost in the large number of classes that exist. Or not know what name it is. Questions?
Not yet.
No.
Okay. So definitely take a look at the API docs. Definitely look at this document as we're going through the labs, because that'll help pointing you to like, oh, these are the classes you need to know about. So now that we've done that, let's actually get you started with setting up your repos. So you'll want to go through this here. I'm going to copy that link and post it here. So this is the link to setting up your lab repo for Unit 0. You'll get another link when we get to Unit 1, etc. I've got assignments created I've got assignments here created on Google Classroom for each of these units. So Unit 0, Unit 1, Unit 2, Unit 3, Unit 4. I'll be creating ones for Unit 5 and 6 as well. So that's what I want you to follow that link and join the assignment. Once you do, you'll show up here for me so I can see that
I just did it.
got the repo. What?
I just did it.
Okay. So you want to follow that link. That'll set up the repo. And then once you get the repo set up and you follow the link, just remember that you want to go to code here and you want to say copy this link because you want to do a clone. Don't do the download zip option. You want to do a clone because if you do the download zip, you won't be able to push up your changes. So you copy that link, go to your folder where you're going to do your labs, and remember you're going to do git clone. You should see something like this. To get your repo pulled down.
Where was that at?
So once you get the repo created, it should give you a link to this page. say go to the repo, and then you're going to click on code, the drop down, and you see this field here.
Yeah.
Little clipboard icon to copy that. So once you've copied that, you just go right click and say git clone.
Okay. So do I accept the invitation and then the assignment, I guess?
Yeah, so you'll accept the invitation. That will go start creating the repo. When it finishes, it'll let you get to the next step. So if I pull
Because
up,
it says I accepted the assignment, and then it's giving me invite and assignment.
can you post a screenshot of what you're seeing?
I don't have any code in mine. Is that supposed to not have any code?
You should have some files.
Yeah, I only have .git, getignore license, and readme.md.
Yep, that's all that should be there.
Oh, okay.
That's all that should be there. If it looks like this, then that's correct. Correct. Corey, try to click on that second link.
The access your assignment?
Yeah. That's new. It's never, I don't think I've ever seen that before.
Okay, yeah, it took me to the page you're seeing now.
Okay, yeah. Because I don't believe you have to join the organization to make things work. I'm pretty sure because...
Yeah, because I went through your link from Discord, and I just followed it through, and then that's what it gave me, so I didn't know if I had to re-accept an invite or something.
Yeah, no. That's all you got to do. Okay. So just to confirm that everybody's got it working, I'm going to toss up Hello World on Discord. And if you've got it pulled down and working, then you should be able to drop that in your repo and commit it.
I'm still cloning.
Yeah, that's no problem.
Just drop it in the main Android Labs -00
Yeah, just drop it
And-
in Android Lab 00.
and commit and push, right?
Quit and push it. Yep. So if that all goes through, then I should be able to see it here as you having 2 commits, and that just makes sure that you've got everything all working right.
It should be pushed.
Sorry, what did you want us to push?
I dropped the Hello World that we just wrote into Discord, so you can download that and add that to your repo.
We just use the tortoise git to do the
Yep.
commit push. I've always used the built-in stuff in Visual Studio.
Yeah. When we get to, so IntelliJ, and both IntelliJ and Android Studio have built-in functionality for that. So you'll be able to do it through the IDE again. At that
How do we
point.
do it? How do we do it here though? Git commit main.
Yeah. So when you go to, let me go to one of my here. So you go git commit.
Oh, hang on.
Put in a comment and there. So you'll right click in the folder and say commit.
Do you want us to? I had it clicked on something else.
Huh?
Can you do it once more? Because I had it off the screen for a second. Git commit. That's everything right there.
Git commit. Yeah. What were you saying, Corey?
I was saying, do you want us to have like any folder structure inside of it?
So what you'll do is for each lab that you create, that'll be a separate folder.
But for this, we don't need any folders or anything like that.
Yeah, not right now. Not right now. But yeah, each lab that you'll create will be a separate folder, and we'll go through that tomorrow as we get used to IntelliJ. So you don't need to create any folders today, but we will start creating folders tomorrow.
Okay.
Push all branches. Is that?
That sounds right. Okay, yeah, so I see 2 commits there. So that definitely went through. It just hasn't updated here. Cool. So that gets... Yep.
I just committed. I don't know if you're waiting for us to do it or not, but
Yeah, I'll go look, because I was hoping that maybe it would show up right here, but it's not. I have to actually go through everybody one by one, so I'll look in a minute and check. Going back here, so the last thing to do is to just get you started on the instructions. So I kind of have already mentioned this on perusal. You have 2 assignments here. Set up your dev environment. You'll go read through that. That will give you all the steps to set up your more standard stuff. Most of the stuff in this document in 01 in setting up your dev environment you've already done. Versus this second one, install Java SDK in Android Studio. This is probably going to be all new stuff that you need to do. So maybe what I'll do, I would still advise everybody to go through and do the setup at your dev environment just to make sure that everything's good. But I think what I'll do is we can walk through together and go through some of the steps on the JDK and in IntelliJ now. Because we've got a little bit before the end of class. So the first thing you'll want to do, notice that I've said here you need to do these in order. If you try to do these things out of order, it can cause some issues because the JDK needs to be installed first and the Java Home needs to be set up first before you do anything else. So you do want to make sure that you do the steps in the order that they're listed. So does everybody have can everybody pull up, once you get your code committed, which I'll give everybody a minute to do that, please pull up the instructions for installing the SDK and let's get started with that so we can kind of work through some of those things.
And you said you want us to wait for you to go through it.
No, go ahead and start it.
Okay.
I'm just gonna sit here and give some guidance. So if you're ahead of me, then go for it. So first thing you want to do is go to the download link here, and so you'll see Java SE 15. That's the latest version. There's 2 versions of Java. There's the Java runtime environment, which is all you need to run Java applications. And there's the JDK, which is what you need to actually develop Java application, including Android. So that's what we want to get. We want to get the JDK. So as you scroll down, you'll want to go, or actually it's right here. You'll see JDK SE 15. SE stands for Standard Edition. There's historically been 3 different versions of Java. The Standard Edition is what you run on desktops and what Android is based off of. There is a Java EE Enterprise Edition, which is what you use for building websites and web applications. And there's a Java ME short for Mobile Edition, which used to be for smartphones prior to Android being a thing. So there actually were Java-powered devices prior to Android, which ran off of Java ME. But as far as I know, there are not very many Java ME devices in existence anymore. So SE is basically the one we're going to be using purely in this semester. That's the desktop version of it. So you'll go to JDK download. You're going to come down here. What version do you want to download?
The 64 installer.
64-bit installer. So that's going to be this. And you can see what's the extension there?
.exe.
.exe. If you're getting something that's a zip, that's not what you want. You can install Java that way, but it is much harder. So make it easy on yourself and get the exe. It's also smaller. So you pull that down. From there, it's pretty easy because you just run the installer and follow all the standard steps. it'll ask you for the JDK folder. Just leave it as the default as you do that. Because you can run into some issues if you put the JDK somewhere that's not the norm. Okay. So I just put a question up on Perusal. When you get to the step that says, hey, where do you want the JDK installed? You can just copy and paste the path that it gives you. Oh, on the note briefly of Perusal and grading on Perusal, I've simplified the way that it does the weighting quite a bit. So the only two things, the two metrics that it's gonna use for grading on Perusal is going to be the amount of time you spend reading or watching the videos and the comments that you leave. So you get a good amount of credit just for spending time reading, and as well as watching the video. You'll get, I think, up to potentially 50% of the credit just by spending the necessary time reading or watching. The rest of that you'll then get by leaving comments. And remember, you can always leave a comment of your original writing, or you can be responding to somebody else's question. Responding to somebody else's question gives you just the same amount of credit as writing your own original comment. Now, Jonathan, is that actually where it ended up? Is in Java? Because you should have a JDK folder that it went into. It shouldn't have gotten to just the Java folder itself. Okay. Yeah, because if you look in Java, you should see okay. Yeah, you're probably going to see a few different copies of the JDK. Because Java does not uninstall old versions. It's just like, oh, keep all those old versions.
Oh yeah, what do you do about that? I got an old version installed.
You would just uninstall it. If you're not using it, you would just uninstall it. But you can see, like, I have 15 installed and 13 and 12 because I've been doing Java for a while and have needed it for a few different things. but you can do it through program files. Just the same way you add and remove, uninstall programs normally in Windows. That's how you would uninstall those old versions. Don't just delete the folder is the one thing that you don't want to do. Is you want to actually go run the uninstaller. Ooh. What I would do, Vincent, is delete your cookies. If you have like edit this cookie plugin, I would go delete the cookies for perusal, and maybe that'll help you.
So is that comment counting as our attendance for today?
Yeah, that'll be enough for attendance today.
Okay.
So you don't need all these screenshots?
I do want all those screenshots. Those screenshots will count as your perusal grade on inside Ranken. Does that make sense?
Do you just want us to send them to you in Discord?
Yeah, that's fine. You can send me on Discord. That's fine. But yeah, no, that's the screenshots and such will go in towards your actual assignment grade. But the comment's good enough to mark you present.
Oh, sorry. What about the screenshot? Where do we put that to send it direct message to you of the program running?
You said what program running?
Of the Java development kit.
Oh, well, I would said just comment on that.
Oh, that's good enough. That's all we got to do.
So
okay.
So now if you have that folder, then you probably gotten far enough that it's it's a few steps further to actually finish the install, but that's good enough to know, hey, you actually ran it.
Okay.
So all of the screenshots we send, are they just going to be the showing that we have it?
Yep, showing that you have everything set up and good. So I'm looking for things like version numbers to make sure you have the right version numbers of everything. That's the biggest thing I want to see. So like what version of Android Studio do you have installed? What version of IntelliJ? What version of the JDK do you have installed?
Do you still want us to send you everything like the docking and stuff like that?
Oh yeah, I don't need a screenshot of your dock drivers.
Or so I know this is the on 001, all those. Do you want screenshots of making sure we have Notepad and stuff like that?
Yeah, all that stuff. Yeah. Yes.
You want that by tomorrow so we can work on this after school today, correct?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. So if you don't you can work it up through finish. As long as you get it done before class tomorrow, you're fine.
Okay.
It's just that you'll want to have IntelliJ up and ready to start tomorrow, because we'll jump right into IntelliJ tomorrow. So once you get the JDK installed, you'll see step 2 is to set up this Java home environment variable. So that's what I need you to do. From there is to set that up. So the name of the environment variable is Java home. And then what you'll put in there as the path is that same thing, that you saw for the installation directory. It is important when you put that in to make sure that it ends in a slash. So make sure your Java home variable ends in a slash, and make sure it has that JDK version in it too. It can't be just program files Java. It has to be program files Java JDK blah, JDK 15. Vincent, did you manage to get back, to get in, finally, to get into Perusal? Cool. Okay.
Are you setting those up like preemptively? Like, are we still going through it?
Yep, I'm just setting
Okay.
it preemptively because I'm not sure which. I'm assuming that some people are at a different spot than others.
Okay.
So yeah, I'm setting them up preemptively. Whenever you get there, let me know. But that's the, once you get the Java home part, that's the easiest part to make a mistake on. The rest after that is pretty self-explanatory and it's hard to get wrong.
But you're still going through it.
Yeah, I'll still go through it.
All right.
If you have any questions. So, desktop shortcut. If I would probably create a 64-bit launcher shortcut, Daniel, to answer your question. And that would be the only thing I would check.
$64-bit launcher on IntelliJ, is that what you said?
Mm-hmm. But really, that's personal preference. If you don't check that box, then you can still get to it through the start menu. So it's really up to you. But that's the only one that really is helpful, I would say, is the launcher shortcut. In terms of IntelliJ, I think I said to install Community already, but the ultimate version is their version that's enterprise that you have to pay for. Community version is free. That's basically the difference. So I believe this one supports Java EE and this one's Java SE Standard Edition. So we're not doing anything with Java Enterprise Edition.
And you said for the IntelliJ, just to do the 64-bit launcher check, and that's it?
Yep. Yeah, the rest you can leave unchecked. Once you get both Android Studio and IntelliJ installed, just pay attention to this. These settings you configure, you'll want to configure them both in IntelliJ and in Android Studio. They don't share settings, so you'll actually have to do that configuration twice, unfortunately.
Android Studio, that's a heavy program. It's taking some time.
Yes, it's a pretty big program. That's true.
How do you like it as far as user friendliness compared to Visual Studio Code?
I'd say it's really good. In terms of user friendliness, it's really good. The only thing my only complaint about Android Studio is that they change things all the time. So I mean, even something little, like at the end of last spring, it was like within the last month of the semester, they moved one of the buttons from one place to another and changed the icon on it, which like, so some students it looked one way and other students it looked another way. There's also there's another button in there when working with constraint layout that they've changed at least 3 or 4 times. And it's like, why did you have to change that again? I mean, I guess they're trying to find the right place for it because it was a little bit awkward, but that's my only complaint about Android Studio is that they change things all the time. Sorry.
You said that Google doesn't create this Android Studio, didn't you?
I don't know what their connection with it is, but if you look at Android Studio and you pay really a close attention to it, notice that it says powered by IntelliJ.
Not yet. I don't.
Okay.
Seems like I'm stuck on downloading an API.
It's actually so underneath the covers, Android Studio is IntelliJ. It is a version of IntelliJ. But it has a bunch of stuff on top of that that's specifically designed for Android development.
Okay.
So it is IntelliJ underneath, which means that, when things change, I don't know who's actually making those decisions. I don't know who's actually developing Android Studio, if it's IntelliJ or if it's Google. I suspect it's a combination of the both that's maintaining it. So I don't know who to blame when things change. It's like, is that Google that changed it, or is it IntelliJ that changed that? I don't know. But I know that IntelliJ is really quick about responding to the front end, so I'm guessing that it's IntelliJ more likely. That is the person is the company that's committing most of the changes to Android Studio.
After we finish this course, how easily would we be able to segue over to just building web apps as opposed to just an app like this?
It will give you some tools. I wouldn't say that it will necessarily be, if you want to say build apps in web apps in Java, there are things you have to learn. The core classes that I talked about, I have that document that I showed you about commonly used classes. All of those also exist in the world. Those, you can write console applications and use them in Java applications for the most part, and you can use them in web applications as well, some of them. Minus things like Scanner, which are, basically more console focused. Pretty much most of the ones that I've listed as commonly used classes, most of those you can use in web applications. So, and the syntax for Java is the same. What's different is all of the APIs and things that you need to do. They're also not exactly the same as they are in Node. Does that make sense? Again, the syntax is different, right? So there's a lot of overlap. So, the basic fundamentals that you learned through Node, working with the HTTP protocol, with, status codes, request and response, redirects, all of that stuff really transfers over. But the way that you build Java servlets or JSP or work with Hibernate, all of that stuff is kind of, it has its nuances, right? So just like learning any framework has its nuances that make it different from everything else. But they're also always core fundamentals that are, work and apply regardless of what you build your web applications in. So, like, regardless of whatever you build your web applications in, you're going to have HTML, you're going to have CSS, you're going to have JavaScript, right? And you're going to have HTTP requests, you're going to have forms. So if you understand those things, those are the things that will transfer well between framework to framework. Does that make sense?
Yeah, we should be okay then. Just a little bit of adaptation.
Yeah.
We've done all that.
It's you don't have to learn everything necessarily from scratch, but it will probably take you at least a month to get up to speed if you were to jump into Android Java web development. From what you've learned here to being proficient, it would take you probably at least a month to get there. But you could totally do it. So that's the other upside of, using IntelliJ for a little bit and using Android Studio, which is based on IntelliJ, is you get a little bit of experience and knowledge and familiarity with IntelliJ if you say we're wanting to do something like that, go into Java web development.
When you ask for the make of our laptop, like, you just want, like, if it's a Dell?
Yeah, that's all. Is it a Dell laptop? Is it an Acer laptop? Is it an Asus laptop?
Where's that at?
It should be on the outside of your laptop. Usually.
No, I mean, why would you need to know that? Is that one of the questions?
Well, so there's to run the emulators for Android, you have to potentially install something called Haxum, which requires you to go change a setting in the BIOS. So the instructions for how to do that are different from manufacturer to manufacturer.
Oh, I see it down below. Okay.
Yeah.
Okay. Android SDK tools. I'm not seeing that in the list. I see many things that are like it. It's number 4 on that list. Android SDK.
Same thing. Is that maybe Android SDK build tools?
That's the first one, isn't it?
So where are you looking at here?
It is, yeah.
The configuration Android SDK manager.
Mm-hmm.
Page
Well,
7, second list.
Have you done through all of this stuff yet in Android Studio? Pages 5 and 6.
Yeah.
Okay.
Mm-hmm. It's just not on the list, that's all. It seems like everything's already there by default. The command line tools, maybe that's what that means.
Okay. It will likely be updated right now because you just installed Android Studio, so there may be a lot of things in there. I'm going to go ahead and pop up Android Studio. Just as a question, though, I guess I could look up here. How many people have Android Studio installed so far?
I was waiting for you to go through it.
Okay. So go ahead and get it downloaded because it takes some time. Once everybody has installed, I will go through how to do the SDK stuff, the SDK manager, because there's definitely some nuance there, and it's more than I can just capture in some screenshots easily.
You can always update it later on too. It's not like you got to do it right now.
Yeah, the SDK manager you can easily come back and change later. So this stuff on page 7, yeah, would be the next thing that I would want to walk through people with. So once you have Android Studio installed, we can get down and look at page 7.
Do you still want us to send photos of us downloading like these things that we're doing together in class, like Android Studios and stuff like that, or?
I mean, yes, yeah. Yes, please. I'm just going to say yes. The answer is yes.
Do we need to import anything on Android?
Android Studio? Like the...
Yeah.
I don't think you should. Probably not.
So just don't import settings.
Yeah, because it should be a fresh install. So you should be able to just tell it to not import anything.
Okay, because I remember seeing you go through, but I didn't know if we were following the same.
Yeah, I was trying to play around with it to see, because I just went and updated IntelliJ, but I think it wiped out all my settings that I had configured, like going through these install instructions.
Is data sharing going to be required?
What do you mean data sharing?
I got a pop-up that says send statistics to Google. I didn't know if you were going to be using any of that through Google.
that's completely up to you. You don't need to check on that. That's up to you. That's just whether or not you send. That's not data we would have access to anyway. It's like, do you want to send data to Google about what you're doing so that they can try and make the software better? That's completely up to you. That's a privacy setting.
I see Troy's over here flexing with the CPU.
Troy?
I don't know if I'd call it a flex, but thanks.
What did you post about your CPU?
I just said what it was.
Oh. Okay. Uh-huh. A Xeon. Why do you have a server processor in your?
Yeah, this is my desktop,
Yeah.
which I'd probably be using most of the time.
Doing some
What if I don't
server.
know?
So if you don't know, I believe.
I did the start menu and then type system information. That should
Yeah,
do
I
it.
think that sounds right. System information. It should be right there. Oh,
Paul,
yeah.
you told me you had an i9-10 series in your computer.
Oh, no, I lied to you, man. Yeah, sorry.
Yeah. Yeah, that's what
I
you're
did-
looking for.
It is 24 gig, though, which I'm proud of.
$24 gigs of RAM.
But
Yep.
yeah.
I got 64.
It used to be that these drivers didn't work well on AMD CPUs, but I saw something when I was messing around with the other day. I think they've got some new images, so if you do have an AMD CPU, there's a good chance that will work for you this time through. So if you have that, I would definitely. That's part of why I'm asking, like, do you have an AMD CPU? Because then we can try that and see if it works for you.
Do I have to wait for the Android Studio to install to see the version? Because I don't see the file itself.
The version of Android Studio?
Yeah.
Yeah, you'll just want to wait till it finishes installing, because once it finishes and installing, it'll be right here.
Okay.
It's gonna be a while.
That's fine. This takes some time. This is why I don't plan to, all the things that we have to do day one, I don't plan to do much actual coding. But since we have some time, it's like, oh, well, we finished early, so we can start going through some of the install instructions together. Because otherwise, normally I'd just say, okay, go do it.
I'm in my antivirus exclusions page, and apparently I have an entire hard drive excluded.
Ooh, that's probably not what you want to do.
I don't know how that happened. I think I'm going to take that one out.
Yeah, I wouldn't exclude the entire hard drive, but having some exclusions on those folders will make things faster.
Yeah, fortunately, it wasn't my C drive, or I would have been really concerned.
Ooh, yeah. I almost wonder if maybe your computer manufacturer didn't just put that in for you or something.
Well, it's custom build, so
Yeah.
probably not.
Yeah, I don't know. What version?
Okay, we'll probably have to do the HackSim stuff afterward because we'll have to restart.
Yeah.
Okay, I see that.
And getting the HackSim stuff right is a little bit hard because you can't stream your screen while you're in the BIOS because that's before Windows boots up. So you'll probably have to use your phone to record that.
Wait, what? Let me have. Oh my gosh, I forgot English. What do we need to record with our phones again? Sorry.
When you get down to the bottom of page 7, there's something you may need to do in the BIOS, and I'll walk you through it. Basically, the way you're going to know that you need to do it is you'll get an error in Windows, and then we'll say, okay, here's the thing we need to go do. But if you don't get an error in Windows, then you're fine.
And you said
Sounds good.
we're waiting for you to do the configuration for Android Studios and stuff.
Yeah, so if you've got Android Studio installed, let me know. It looks like I see 4 people have definitely installed Android Studio so far. So I'm waiting on.
I'll go through and answer the rest of the questions then.
Yeah.
How far might we get today? Because my Android Studios is still going. And I mean, I still have a few minutes, but I have work today, so.
Yeah. So then we'll proceed, but let's see. So let's see who's not up to speed. So Corey, you've got it installed. Daniel, you've got it. Jonathan, where are you at right now? Jonathan. Okay. Troy, check. Vincent, do you have Android Studio installed? Okay. Zach, where are you at?
I have it installed.
Okay. So which version of Android Studio do you have installed?
4.1.1.
Cool. Okay. Jonathan, are you there? Okay. So, Sheridan, you're still installing, right? So.
Yeah, I think it's finishing up right now.
Yeah. Oh, okay. The progress bar is almost done.
Yeah, it says creating Android. Oh, and never mind, it just disappeared into lots of parsing.
Yeah. If you've already got IntelliJ installed, that's the biggest part. That's the part that you need for tomorrow. So.
All right, it just finished up. Yeah, I got the 4.1.1.
Awesome. Okay. So what you want to do, and I think a few people have commented on this front already, you want to go to Configure, and you'll see a few options show up here. So there's a bunch of different things that you can configure. You want to click here on SDK Manager. So you're going to go Configure, SDK Manager. That will bring up a window like this. So the SDK, this is the Android SDK specifically. There's a bunch of different versions of this that you may need to get installed for the different devices that you're supporting. So I think I said down here, page 7, here are the versions of Android Studio, the Android SDK that I'll want you to get installed. Let me get back in here. Configure SDK Manager. So the version that you need are 5, 5.1, 9, and 11. I've got some additional versions installed because I was doing stuff with some of the existing applications and projects and such. So.
Oh, did you ask for me? Sorry, I was in the bathroom.
Oh, no, it's no problem. Do you have Android Studio installed?
Yeah, I sent you screenshots
Okay,
of
cool.
Android version, everything.
I think you did, yeah. So what you'll want to do is get, yeah, there, I see it now. So you'll want to go into, once you get it open, hit configure, and then go into SDK Manager. So here, this will pop up, configure SDK Manager. And what you want to do is check the boxes here. So 5.1, etc. Make sure those are checked. So you want those versions of Android Studio. That's partly based on the devices that we have, what version of Android Studio they're running, but it's also based on, I think you need 10 to be able to target that 29. So because we're targeting 21 through 29, that's partly why you need 10 and you need 10 and 5.0 for sure. And then
Right.
I can't remember what those other ones are about.
So does apply initiate the installation?
Yep. You can hit either OK or apply. That'll start the install. And then once you get that installed, I think you can actually do it at the same time. There's a second tab called SDK Tools. And you'll want to go in there and update things that need to be updated. So for instance, for me, can everybody see this? It says update available 33.5. Because I have a slightly older version of the emulator. You see that?
It's not allowing me to also do the other one. It's waiting for this one to first download.
Okay. Yeah, it'll probably be doing that. But that's where you get to the SDK tools. It's just the second tab here. And you'll just want to basically update anything that's not checked, or it's like a dash like this means that it's installed, but it's not up to date.
Antivirus exclusions, it says our projects folder. Is that just going to be our repo, or should we?
That should be wherever you're going to put your repos. So I would do one step above that.
Okay.
So like I put all my projects in under D projects, so I would exclude that. Or if you're using C projects, or if it's in your documents, then you want to make a projects folder there or something. But it's it's wherever your repos are. So where your repos are is where you want to exclude. But I wouldn't want to do that on a per repo basis, if that makes sense.
Is it going to take this long for the tools as well?
The tools should be quicker than the platforms. The platforms are pretty big.
Yeah, there's a lot of unzipping going on right now.
The platforms are really big, and you'll notice that I made a comment that these are rather large, so only download the ones you need. They do take up a lot of space on disk. These SDK platforms, if I remember right, are between 1 and 3 gigs a piece. Just fair forewarning. So I should definitely reduce the number of ones that I have installed, because I have probably too many installed right now. But So, by the way, place where you're most likely to run into one of those errors about Haxum is when you do these tools. When you check that box and hit install, that's the most likely place for it to error out about Haxum when it tries to do that install.
I'm guessing the enable developer options is for the devices we're going to get next Tuesday.
Yes. Yeah. So when you're looking at page 9, you can install the Samsung drivers now, but everything else on page 9 you'll actually need the devices for. So you'll get those on Tuesday.
The folder settings for Windows Defender, where are those?
So yeah, let me open those. Let me check first. Does anybody have any questions on the SDK tools thing or the platforms thing now?
No, I'm just starting to download the tools now.
Okay. I'm gonna go ahead and say that. Tell that to go.
I don't have the Android SDK tools. Number 4 on perusal.
It should be here. Do you see it on my screen?
I don't have it either.
Okay. 2611. For me, it's right under SCK Platform Tools.
Yeah, I have platform tools.
It's
do not see it.
It's hide. You have to unclick the hide obelisk packages.
Oh.
So it's obsolete.
It's been a long day, y'all.
No, I was just saying the
No,
file itself.
Troy just corrected me too.
I was saying the file was obsolete. I didn't mean to correct
It
you.
is obsolete now.
It might be. That would explain it. Again, changing things. Which, if it's marked as obsolete, you probably don't need it. But okay. So Windows Defender. So if you go Windows Security, I think it is, you'll get a screen like this, and it'll be like virus and threat protection. And then inside of here, and the part of the reason I didn't put screenshots is just it's so different between, say, McAfee and Norton and etc. But in Windows Defender, it's virus and threat protection settings. There it is. So you're going to go into virus and threat protection settings. Do you see that, Paul?
Looking for it. I got in another way.
Okay.
I just typed start menu and typed in Defender and got to it in there.
Okay.
That's okay too, yeah?
Yeah. I don't know which version of Windows you have installed, but this is the current version of Windows Defender in here. Is kind of built into Windows, so you might have Defender as a separate application.
Okay, I got the old school way, but I found what you're looking. What
Yeah.
you got there. Okay, current threats in the folder. Control.
But it looks like this.
You're recording this, right?
I am.
I gotta go to work, so.
Yep. I'll see you tomorrow.
Alright, bye.
Bye.
And just like it looks right there, or is that just a placeholder, that percent user profile percent?
That's a placeholder. So if you type that in, it'll convert it to the right thing.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, just type that in literally as it says, and it will actually convert it to the right thing. That's a environment variable in Windows, and it'll same thing with local app data. It'll actually convert it to what it needs to be.
All right. Do we have to do anything on IntelliJ or whatever? So I thought you said we had to do.
The only thing on IntelliJ is pages 5 and 6.
All right, so I'll do those before I do the Defender stuff.
Yeah. Is pages 5 and 6. But sounds like everybody's got IntelliJ, Android Studio started, up and running, so that's good. That will make us prepped and ready to go tomorrow to jump into Java. So tomorrow the plan is we'll go through. We're going to start on this Java tutorial for beginners. It's about a 3-hour long video. So we'll start and watch the first part of it and code on along a little bit tomorrow. That's basically the plan. Is we'll start with that mosh, and then I'll give you the console app, the labs, and you can start on the labs tomorrow.
I can't find the .cache folder. Is that hidden?
It might be. Where are you looking? Where are you looking for it?
Just in user profiles, I see Android config. I don't see Gradle there either. I see VS Code. There's some that are there.
Yeah. You might not have them yet, because it's possible that it hasn't created them yet.
Oh, okay.
It may be that it hasn't created it yet because you haven't actually created a project yet. Or
Yeah. Should I just create the folder? Will that cause a problem?
I think you can go ahead and create the folder. If it's not there, you should be okay with creating the folder. But yeah, what's in mine, as you can see, is font cache. And yeah, Gradle you probably won't get until the first time you actually build a project. So yeah, you can create the folder and grant the exclusion right away.
Mr. Smith, on page 6.
Yep.
When you say the code style Java,
Uh-huh.
I'm in code style, but I don't see Java.
So your editor code style, and are you in IntelliJ or are you in
Android Studio?
Android Studio. Okay, let me pull up Android Studio. Configure settings, and I have a code style Java right there. Can you send me a screenshot of what you're seeing?
Oh, never mind. I found it.
Okay.
It just didn't lower the drop down, which I thought was lowered.
Yeah, that would do it.
That's my bad.
Oh, Paul, you probably don't want to exclude your entire C folder.
Oh, that was already in there.
Yeah, you probably want to remove that first exclusion.
Okay, glad I sent it then.
Because that's saying it doesn't want to scan for any viruses anywhere on your C drive.
So do we have to install Haxum separately? Because I remember when I was in the Android downloader, I saw Haxum in there somewhere.
Yes.
I don't know if that.
Yeah. I believe that if you click that, it's already downloaded it somewhere on your computer.
Okay.
And I can't remember if it actually runs the installer for that or not. I feel like sometimes I've seen it already to the installer, and sometimes it just downloads the installer. Let's see, tools. Where would that be? Extras. Yeah. So somewhere in your Android SDK, which is going to be a different folder than where I have it. Android SDK, Extras, Intel, Hardware Accelerated Execution Manager. You're going to get into here, and you'll have this, I believe, is the one. Yeah, and you should see something like that when you run it.
But it's probably already run. Is that what you mean?
Probably already run. If it hasn't run through successfully, you'll get an error when we get to trying to do emulators in 2 weeks from now.
All right, because I didn't get an error installing or updating the stuff.
Yeah.
But I don't know.
Yeah, that's fine. That's fine. We'll diagnose it if there's a problem. We'll diagnose it in 2 weeks, and no big deal. The important part is to just get the main part of the software installed.
Okay, gotcha. Yeah, now I'm on the last part for the excluding stuff.
Yeah. A lot of this stuff won't bite us until a few weeks from now. So, but I've, all the instructions are there to try and avert problems before they happen. It is 4:30, so I'm gonna kill the recording.